Good morning, everybody. Well, apologies, mute myself. My name's Edward Maxwell. I'm from Democratic Services, and I'd like to welcome you to this first meeting of the 2025-26 civic year for the Harrogate and Knaresborough Area Committee. And I'd like to start the meeting by seeking nominations for a chair. Councillor Timothy.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Lacey, please, for his experience as vice chair has done us very well. I'm sure he'll be very good if he's elected chair.
Thank you very much. And is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Slater. Are there any other nominations for chair? No. So with one nomination for Councillor Lacey, that's the motion before the committee. So if we could just take a vote, all those in favour, please. And I don't think that's any opposed or abstention, so that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Councillor Lacey is duly elected as the chair of the Area Committee.
Thank you very much, and welcome from me as well, from visitors and members of the public to this meeting. Just brief announcements before we proceed. There are no firearms planned, so if you do hear a firearm, exits are signposted back out through this way and that way. Thank you for my tea. Meeting is being live streamed and is available to view on the Council's website, and please do use your microphones, switch off once finished speaking to facilitate both the live stream and those present in the meeting. With regard to a pre-election period, people will be aware that we are in a pre-election period with elections for the Eastfield Division in Scarborough being held on Thursday the 19th of June. Whilst the business of the Council continues, we do need to be mindful of avoiding giving an individual or a political group a platform by which they can influence public opinion in the lead up to that election. Please can I ask that all members are mindful of this during today's proceedings. We move then to item 2 on the agenda, which is the election of Vice Chair. Do you do the formalities in seeking? I'd like to, well, I have a nomination of Councillor Goslow.
Thank you. Are there any seconders? Councillor Walker, thank you very much. Do we have any other nominations for Vice Chair? So with that, the motion before the committee is that Councillor Goslow be appointed as the Vice Chair of the Area Committee. So can we take a show of hands, all those in favour? Thank you, and that should be no abstentions or opposed. So Councillor Goslow is duly elected as the Vice Chair for the Harrogate and Knaresborough Area Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Have we received apologies?
We have received apologies from Councillor John Mann.
Okay, thank you very much. The minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of March. Can I ask, first of all, whether anybody has any amendments to those minutes? They are a true and accurate record, therefore, of our meeting. Do we vote on agreeing those minutes? Can we have a vote on agreeing? Yeah, show of hands on accepting those minutes. Thank you. And I will duly sign either now or immediately afterwards. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to matters on the agenda today? Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, item 1, I think, our MP, Tom Gordon, I would like to declare that I work in his office.
Thank you. And legal advice has been sought that you are able to ask questions and contribute, having declared that interest. Thank you. Councillor Timothy.
Same. I also work in the office of the MP.
Same basis. Who else was there? Councillor Goslow. And yeah,
I'd just like to declare that I'm also a Knaresborough Town Councillor as well as a North Yorkshire Councillor in case it comes up in the agenda.
Okay. And Councillor Walker.
Yeah, so I'm going to declare as well that I'm a Knaresborough Town Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. Everybody knows where we are. So the item 6 on the agenda is public participation. We have one statement submitted by Christopher Dunn, who's here to present that, and then there will be a response from the Head of Network Strategy. But Christopher, would you like to contribute?
Yeah. Good morning, councillors. I'm here as a citizen, even though I'm a serving councillor at Killinghall Parish Council. I'm here as a citizen only. Lucian Stephen Wilk, 91, a Killinghall resident, died on the 7th of November 2023 as a result of a fatal road accident on the 6th of November, that previous evening, 80 metres south of the Killinghall border on the A61 northbound carriageway, adjacent a bus stop and Knoxmill Lane, and also adjacent the Ringway path. The location of the accident was in the New Park division of NYC and now the New Park ward of the Harrogate Town Council. The inquest on the 24th of March 2025 found no fault with any party. Killinghall Council and North Yorkshire Council local division councillors Slater and Harrison were not consulted, nor were the Harrogate local policing unit, nor any road or public right-of-way user groups. 7 new road lights, 2 massive road signs, a bus stop extinguished, and a new bus stop were created. North Yorkshire contractors within metres and within eyeshot and earshot of the bereaved who live close by, they moved the so-called offending bus stop on the day of the inquest on the 24th of March 25. One new road light even now illuminates the bus stop, which is no longer there because it's been moved. Why does it take the sacrificed death of an innocent pedestrian pensioner in order for North Yorkshire Council to magic up many thousands of pounds of questionable civil works, whereas this lethal road junction is still as unsafe as it always has been? Thank you.
Thank you for Christopher, and I understand we now have a response from Alan McVeigh. Is he online?
Thank you.
He's online.
Thank
Sorry,
you. Yes, I am. Good morning. Hi, good morning, members. So the response is that all fatal road traffic collisions that occur on the local road network in North Yorkshire are the subject of a fatal collision inspection, or FCI. The purpose of which is to understand the collision causation and identify whether improvements to the road or surrounding infrastructure can be made. This is either to reduce the risk of a future similar collision occurring, i.e. to address what is referred to as a contributory factor, or to correct any minor defects observed during the inspection, but which were otherwise unconnected to the collision being investigated, or non-contributory factors. Following the untimely death of Mr. Wilk, an FCI was carried out on Monday, 13th of November 2023, in conjunction with North Yorkshire Police. The police are involved directly in all fatal collision investigations that are carried out by North Yorkshire Council. An FCI report was published in April 2024, which made 4 recommendations. Number 1, relocate the northbound bus stop with road markings, signage, footway link, and an informal crossing facility, contributory factor. 2, carry out a consultation exercise on the removal of the southbound bus stop facility, contributory factor. 3, investigate the feasibility of introducing street lighting in the vicinity of Knoxmill Lane Junction and the new northbound bus stop. If feasible and financially viable, implement street lighting columns as soon as possible, contributory factor. 4, introduce improved permanent signage, larger warning sign or map type advanced direction sign to highlight the Knoxmill Lane Junction, non-contributory factor. Officers carried out the feasibility, design and consultation on these proposals from April 2024 onwards. Engagement took place with the family of Mr. Wilk and residents of Knoxmill Lane. A local site meeting took place, including with the Environment Corporate Director on the 2nd of April 2024, and the family and residents were emailed the FCI recommendations on the 7th of May 2024 in order to seek their views and input on the proposals. There was also another site discussion with a local Knoxmill Lane resident later in the year and conversations over the phone to confirm the improvement proposals. No objections to the recommendations were received. Number 2, Councillor Monica Slater emailed 30th of July 2024, who responded later the same day in support. Number 3, Councillor Michael Harrison, discussion over the phone shortly after the fatal collision inspection. 4, Transdev, the bus operator, confirmation of no objections on the 12th of August 2024. North Yorkshire Police, the police traffic management officer who was part of the FCI team was also kept informed throughout the design process. And 6, local landowners to seek permission for the signage in the private land. There was no contact with Killinghall Parish Council as the officer responsible for ordering these works, acting in good faith, believed the whole extent was in the Bilton ward, for which Councillor Monica Slater is the local member and with whom we had engaged. As the parish boundary runs through the middle of Knoxmill Lane, not contacting Killinghall Parish Council was an error. When I was made aware of the mistake, I sent a personal apology to the clerk of Killinghall Parish Council via our public transport team, offering to discuss the matter further if he wished. In addition to officers engaging with the family on the proposed recommendations, I also attended the inquest into the death of Mr. Wilk and explained to the coroner and to the family when the work to move the bus stop was being carried out. Street lighting has been introduced to the south and north of Knoxmill Lane to illuminate Knoxmill Lane Junction, not a previous bus stop. And the advanced direction sign on the northbound approach was introduced to further highlight the presence of the junction and reduce the risk of shunt-type accidents. In addition, prior to the fatal collision, the pre-existing vehicle-activated signs, or VAS, were also replaced northbound and southbound with improved VAS to further highlight the presence of Knoxmill Lane Junction. There are additional columns to the north to illuminate the new southbound bus stop location. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for that comprehensive response to the concern. It's not normal that we debate these matters. However, Councillor Harrison and Councillor Slater have both been named in both the statement and the response, so I will give them an opportunity to make comment if they wish. Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to sort of clarify, because I was mentioned, to say that I was consulted sounds more, doesn't quite fit with how I feel, really. My communications with North Yorkshire Highways and the passenger service started immediately after the fatal incident in the November. I had a response in the November. I asked to be kept abreast of the findings of the investigation. I heard nothing. I emailed them on the 13th of July and then got the response, to which Mr. McVeigh has just mentioned on the 30th of July. Yes, I did approve the recommendations, but I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't involved all the way along.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Well, I'd like to thank Mr. McVeigh for his update there, and actually it showed that not only have a number of actions have taken place since the accident, but happened beforehand as well to try and improve safety at that junction. So I genuinely don't understand why Mr. Dunn's brought his question. To be perfectly honest, I'm more than happy with what the council's done, albeit I accept that, you know, you can always do more communication, but I prefer to leave these things to the professionals anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. Very briefly, Councillor Haslam.
Yeah, Knoxmill Lane, I think, is part of my patch, but a couple of things. I agree with Councillor Harrison over the fact that lots of work have been done, and I'm not quite sure why the question's arisen, but there is a couple of things that come out of the councillor's response. And I am concerned that the users of public transport weren't consulted. And we've recently had a planning application go through at H2, at which this particular bus site was cited as a regular connection. The users of Harrogate Ringway cross there, and so that's also a concern. but also there's increased walking distances in the road, and although the focus of this is on cars, it's not on pedestrians, and I just think we perhaps need to look at the pedestrian around that or active transport. So that's all I would ask, is that perhaps the officer just takes a quick look at other than motor car, please.
Great. Okay. Alan, I think you're still there. If you can take note of those and perhaps follow up, it's obviously at a point, as a sort of geographical point that affects 3 divisions, which is interesting. So thank you very much. We've addressed the statement, and thank you again, Alan, for your response.
Thank you.
We move on to item 7, annual attendance of the MP for Harrogate and Knaresborough. Tom Gordon, MP, is present with us. I'll give you the floor, the opportunity to describe your activities over the last however many months, nearly a year, and counting, and then we'll open it up for discussion and comment and question from councillors. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just at the beginning would wonder if there's a steer in terms of how long you want me to speak, because I can talk the hind legs off a donkey. And for the interest of making sure that I'm speaking to the point, if you could give me a steer on that, I'd appreciate it.
Tom, and forgive us for not indicating that before. I think 10 or 15 minutes to sort of highlight the key points. Obviously, you can come back to those things. I won't time you precisely, and there isn't a clock ticking, but I might sort of nod at you at 15 minutes if you're still going. Then you can reserve some other comments.
Great, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for the invite and giving me the opportunity to talk about what I've been doing in the almost first year now of being in my new role. As I'm sure you can imagine, it has been a very busy first year, particularly in the context, obviously, we had a change of government and a change of policies at a national level in a variety of different ways, I think is the diplomatic way of putting it. I'll try to take my the sort of steer to this to the things that I talked about in the general election and the things that I was campaigning on in that, because that's probably more useful and more informative than some of the nitty-gritty things. For those of you who didn't end up with countless leaflets through your letterbox, the main 3 things that we were campaigning on were local health services and the NHS, the cost of living and the economy more broadly, and also the environment and in particular the sewage scandal that plagues our rivers. I'll start with the health aspect first of all. So there's been a variety of different ways in which I've been involved both in Parliament and in the constituency trying to tackle some of the challenges that we face. Prior to the general election, we'd been campaigning to make sure that we got the money in full to repair the RAC at Harrogate Hospital. That is something that is still ongoing. There's been a tranche of money, but further amounts are needed to completely eradicate RAC from that site. That is something that I'm slightly concerned about. That programme, the RAC removal scheme, has been administered through NHS England, which we now know will be abolished in effect. So we're still seeking clarity on who will be delivering those programmes, and that money will be ring-fenced still to deliver those programmes in full, and that Harrogate gets the money that it needs to repair and eradicate that RAC. There was an announcement last week about a few £1 million of funding for upgrades in terms of fire safety at Harrogate Hospital, and that's welcome. And I spoke to the Chief Executive about that, and we have regular communication. The other aspect on sort of health is dentistry. We've met with a number of dental providers as well as the chair of the BDA, the British Dental Association. There is a general perception that things are starting to get better, but there's still quite a way to go. There's a massive national challenge with the recruitment and training of dentists that we still need to see a proper plan from the government to address and fix, and full reform of the dental contracts too. One of the larger sort of challenges that the country is facing, of course, I would say, is still the state of the economy. The budget that we had has impacted on all services, health and further afield too. We have had local hospitality, catering, hotels, pretty much every business in Harrogate and Knaresborough has been in touch in some shape, way or form about the increase to employer NICs and also the reduction at the threshold as well at which they start paying it. This is something that I think everyone of every political persuasion and party has been raising in Parliament. I've been doing my bit as well, trying to make sure that we address the concerns that our local businesses are facing. I think there's a particular worry that high streets are already struggling, that they don't get the support that they need. There's still not been a reform to business rates, and local government funding is not there to underpin and help our local economy in the way that we would like. In addition to that, there's additional challenges for farmers, as I'm sure everyone is aware, with the changes to APR. Obviously, the constituency is relatively urban, but we still do have a decent chunk of agricultural land and farms in the area. I've met with local farmers, and I think it's probably fair to say that no one's averse to paying their fair share of tax, but the way in which the government have gone about this, the lack of consultation, the lack of taper, and the fact that they won't be closing down loopholes that people like Dyson exploit to avoid inheritance tax is really the sort of kicker for local farmers. And that is something that as a party and myself we've been campaigning on, calling for the reversal of that. One of the things that's got less coverage is the changes to BPR, which will affect family businesses. We know as a local area that we've got a decent hospitality and tourism sector, loads of B&Bs, many of which are family businesses, but as well big national businesses as well, which are still family run, like Betty's and Taylor's. And the impact that BPR will have on them is quite substantial.
Sorry, BPR for people?
Business Property Relief. So it's there's a real worry there that it will be a double whammy for farmers, but even for business, it might pull the rug out from underneath them at a time when they've already been clobbered with things like employer nicks and rising costs and increases in minimum wage. So there's a bit of a perfect storm there for local business. And then on the environment and sewage, there's been a number of meetings between myself and different authorities, including the Environment Agency. I went down to the NID with Councillor Goslow, where we met the EA and heard about the work that they're doing. I think it's probably fair to say there's still more that could be done. They have massively ramped up the number of environmental enforcement officers who now go out and investigate the causes of sewage in our rivers. There seems to be a particular issue in the Harrogate and Knaresborough area where it's not all about heavy rain causing the spills into the rivers, but in particular the new housing developments and the lack of capacity and existing developments from decades gone by. And we know that actually we see more of an issue when it's dry weather rather than when it's raining, which is different to many other places. I had a meeting fairly early on with the Chief Executive of Yorkshire Water. I think it's probably fair to say that I've continued to be critical after the election. To put it politely, there are measures that have been taken in Parliament by the new Labour government to address some of these issues. But the worry is that with the review that's going on, the Cunliffe review, it's going to take far too long and to some degree still will let the water companies off the hook. As a party and as an individual, we've been pushing and campaigning to make sure that the water companies are public benefit companies, so that money from the profits have to be reinvested into the infrastructure first before anything can be ever paid out as a dividend. I think it's fair to say that there is a concern that nationalisation would see the taxpayer having to stump up millions, if not billions of pounds to rectify decades upon decades of a lack of investment in the water industry. And would not necessarily see an improvement in outcomes straight away. There's been a number of other campaigns that I've been running and working on, both in Parliament and the constituency. I'll sort of canter through them at pace so that there's plenty of time to take questions. One that I've been working on more recently has been trying to extend disabled bus passes. So at the moment, there is through the government, there's a ENCS, which is a requirement that people with disabilities can have access to free bus travel, but that's in certain core hours only. Different local authorities set the time at which that starts. We have been advised after I had a meeting with the minister that we should be campaigning and challenging the local mayor for the combined authority because he's got power over transport and discretion of that funding. The concern that I have is that we will still end up with, if he was to do something, a patchwork of different standards for different people. And when we have services that cross county boundaries into West Yorkshire or into other areas, there is an issue there. As a point of principle, I think that anyone who's living with disabilities already has an increased cost as a result of that. And enabling them to get about and work, travel, get to hospital appointments at any time of the day is actually just a basic principle of fairness. And that's something that we've been working on. We've got a whole host of different constituents who've been in touch about the experiences that they've had about the bus companies, obviously, and that restriction that they've got hindering their ability to get to doctor's appointments, school, or for them to get to the support that they need. On the topic of transport as well, I think one of the more frequent things that has come into my inbox has been changes from North Yorkshire to the home to school transport policy. This is something that I asked about in the House of Commons specifically, and referenced the fact that we have issues with rurality in our area. So that these changes, whilst on the face of it might seem simple, that you will now only get free transport to the nearest school, in reality that doesn't marry up and align with the geography on the ground. We've had a number of different people in Hampsway recently talking about how their kids have already got places at Harrogate Grammar School and now will have to try and either afford the cost of that transport there, or alternatively try and secure an alternative place at Harrogate High, because that's where the funding will be covered for. I think when you've got villages that are split down the middle, sending different kids in different areas to different catchments, that doesn't necessarily make sense, I think, is the polite way to put it. So we've been campaigning on that, and we've been running a petition which has got not an insignificant amount of signatures. And I think there's also a worry that the changes to the homeschool transport policy might end up with the closure of schools. And the whole point is that parents should have a choice. And I think there's a particular issue as well with SEND children who already have to travel, a large way. That's a separate point. We've raised the issues with transport for SEND children repeatedly. The government has been trailing that they're looking at the way in which EHCPs will be sort of allocated and administered, and that's something that we'll be watching closely, as SEND is another big issue in the inbox. On the topic, sort of moving on from transport to education, onto education more broadly, I secured a meeting with the Skills Minister earlier this year to talk about the funding for Harrogate College. So there was a concern sort of immediately after the general election that the funding was time limited and that building had to commence by a certain date to enable the sort of leverage of that combination of both grants and loans. So I raised in Parliament straight away with the Education Minister, Secretary of State, the fact that we couldn't lose that funding because it would be to the detriment of young people in Harrogate, and making sure that they've got the state-of-the-art facilities that they need to get the opportunities and help our local economy. I met with the Skills Minister. She obviously confirmed that the funding would be there. There's not been a sort of new time limit arbitrarily imposed, but it's understood that it is for the project, needs to be delivered in a reasonable, timely manner. Who can define that? Certainly not me. And on the topic of schools and education, I had a meeting with the Early Years Minister about the fact that we have a number of schools within the local area, in both the towns and villages, where it's probably fair to say that the standard of the estates does not live up to what people would expect, and we're not giving every child the best start to life. And again, that's as a result of a lack of funding nationally for local authorities to maintain and invest in those local authority schools. There is some funding that's been announced, but it is still not sufficient or adequate. I went to one school where the boiler is certainly a lot older than me and probably older than most people in this room, and they were saying they can't turn it off in the summer for fear it might not reignite, and if it does break, they can't source the parts for it anymore. Which is leading to schools running higher electricity bills and gas bills to be able to keep the boiler running even when it doesn't need to be, which is adding an additional pressure to school budgets at a time when they're already really, really stretched, and teacher pay increases aren't fully funded by the government. I would just say, in fairness to the DFE, they're probably one of the departments where we've actually had a more constructive relationship, and they are taking things on board. And that school that I mentioned with the boiler, they were able to confirm the timeline for some funding and a rebuild project, which was really welcomed by the school. Other things that I've been up to have been sort of include the sort of big political topics of the day. In terms of winter fuel payments, the government now obviously is talking about reversing that. We know that locally I've had over 368 people get in touch concerned about the cutting of winter fuel payments. We know that in Harrogate and Knaresborough, there's over 6,000 people over the age of 80 who were lost that. There's now been obviously a reversal of that policy, but we still need to get the finer detail on that and what it looks like. Whenever there's been measures to reverse that, sort of voted against it, spoken out about it, and we shall see where we end up with that. There's a similar point on WASPy women as well. Most political parties had put a pledge in there to pay out compensation. We've had well over 100 people get in touch about that. The government announced last year that effectively they would not be listening to the Parliamentary Ombudsman report and finding that there'd been maladministration committed, which is disappointing because it undermines the independence and the whole role and purpose of the Ombudsman. And similar with the infected blood scandal, there's been changes to that too. And we've got a number of people locally who were under a special category mechanism who've now been excluded and will face tens of thousands of pounds less in compensation than they were previously entitled to. In terms of other things that I've been up to in the last year, I have ended up one of the co-chairs of the all-party parliamentary group for adult social care, which is obviously one of the bigger issues that local authorities are facing in terms of the cost and it taking up a large proportion of council budgets. I've had meetings with local health and social care providers in both the constituency and at a national level, met with Carers Resource locally, talked about cuts to unpaid carers services, and again, I think how that feeds into other aspects and other areas of local government and the community, such as CAMS and mental health services too, is really not necessarily getting the funding and attention from national government that it needs, I think is fair to say. I've also ended up setting up and chairing the APPG, the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Diabetes. We know that locally in the constituency we've got thousands of people with either type 1 or type 2 diabetes. My professional background before entering Parliament was working in this area, so it's something that it's quite nice to be able to contribute to something that I have that professional background in. And we'll be doing a range of work on that about how we can get better support and better advances in research for diabetes. The other big local campaign we've been running, as I'm sure people have noticed, is calling for North Yorkshire Council to give back the money from Harrogate Spring Water that used to be spent locally by Harrogate Borough Council. For those of you who don't know, back when Harrogate Spring Water was set up, as part of the agreement with the local authority, the company was giving 0.5% of turnover to HBC. Obviously, when we had local government reorganisation, that was novated across to the new North Yorkshire Council. Now, having met with Harrogate Spring Water and spoken to local residents on the ground, there is a strong opinion that for a company that trades on the town's name, that is really keen to try and do its bit to promote the town, that money should be for the benefit of residents of Harrogate, which is why we've been running that campaign. The response that I had from the leader of North Yorkshire Council was not sympathetic. It is something that we'll continue to look at routes at which we can try to push and force that change. And it's certainly something that we ran and talked about during the Harrogate Town Council elections, where obviously the Liberal Democrats got 15 out of 19 seats. So I think it might be fair to say it got some cut through. It was certainly the go-to thing on the doorstep when I was knocking on doors in those elections, and I didn't find anyone who disagreed. There was a period after the general election, before the inaugural Town Council elections, where it is fair to say that local businesses in particular felt there was a bit of a void following the fact that we no longer had a Harrogate Council, HBC as it was then. So one of the things that I did quite early on was set up what we ended up calling the Harrogate Town Task Force. First meeting of that was held in October last year, and the aim and intention of that was to bring together local stakeholders to tackle issues ranging from support for the local economy and retail to antisocial behaviour. So we've been working with Harrogate Bid and the Chamber to address those concerns, making sure that there's connections and flow of information about things that are happening in the local area. I think at that first meeting, it was quite fractious. I think that was down to the lack of communication, and I'm really pleased to say that when we meet now, it feels that we're very much talking about how we can move things along rather than get things started. And that's been really helpful just in terms of making sure that all the different key stakeholders in the town are looped in and getting the same information from stakeholders, whether it be the council, whether it be now hopefully the town council or the local policing teams. And then finally, I will come on to something a little bit more positive. So last year at the DCMS questions, I asked a question to the Minister for Sport about support and financial aid for Harrogate Town AFC. I was really pleased that the Minister, Steph Peacock, then offered a meeting. Subsequently, at that meeting, we then talked about how we could get the Football Foundation out to meet with Knaresborough Town AFC to talk about how we can help get facilities that might resolve some of the issues that they've got. At the moment, they've got a pitch that is quite frequently waterlogged, meaning the games can't go ahead. So we're looking at now trying to get a 3G pitch, which we know there is a need and demand in that area for. We know that the club also plays a key role in the local community, and they're partnered with local charities and organisations such as Henshaw's and Rainbow Care Dementia. So I met with the club co-chairman, and like I say, we're now pressing for the case to get that funding from Football Foundation, and we just need to sort of match fund the other half of it, to which my office and I will be running the bed race, raising money for that in a week and a bit's time. I've got loads more in my notes. I suspect that some of this might be teased out in the questions that you might now ask. And I shall pass back to you. And thank you very much.
Thank you. And if you think there's something that doesn't come up, I might allow you a small amount of time at the end just to
I don't know how long
raise
I was
it.
talking
We'll
for.
see. But there'll be a number of questions, I'm sure, and thank you for a comprehensive run-through of the last year, nearly. Councillor Haslam, I think you put your hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. You've obviously been busy, so that's good news. That's what we all want in RMP. So thank you very much. I just wanted to hopefully perhaps give you a source of help. You talked about infrastructure, and one of the sources of help there, and you said, well, I went to North Yorkshire and then I was directed at the North Yorkshire Combined Authority. Well, actually, there's a subnational body called Transport for the North, and I would encourage, as I chair scrutiny of Transport for the North, and they do some very good work, in my opinion, I would encourage you to visit what they do. They even have a how to buy a bus process, because obviously buying an electric bus is a new process. But also harmonisation. For example, if you have an electric bus and then the next, Bradford, for example, like hydrogen buses, well, what happens at the border? So there's plenty there for you. What I would say is, in order to leverage your time, which is limited, you might be able to not duplicate what others are already doing by talking to somebody like Transport for the North. The other one that's obvious to me is NID Action Group are very active, and they even had, I believe, I've forgotten which programme it is. I think it's farming, whatever the farming programme is that's on at the weekend. They will be on television publicising the NID in August. Anyway, look, thank you very much. You're doing a great job. Thank you for the comprehensive update.
Yes?
Thank you. I think the point that you make about Transport for the North is a valid one. I'm sure we can pick that up separately outside of this. I'd just like to thank Councillor Haslam, and to be fair, every councillor that I've been involved with. One of the things that I did not long after the election was emailed everyone and offered to meet up and have a chat. I'm really keen to make sure that, regardless of political party or none, as is the case for some, that we work together in the interests of local members of the constituency or council divisions. And again, I would just really echo that if anyone does have any problems or anything that they want any help with, obviously we've got the resource of a parliamentary office and are happy to set up an aid and try to open the doors, which sometimes we all have slammed in our faces. And just on the transport point, it's probably pertinent to mention yesterday's announcement of billions of pounds of funding. I was disappointed to see that we didn't get any money for York and North Yorkshire. There was talk of a funding. It was actually a re-announcement of, in fairness to the Conservatives in the room, funding which had previously been announced by Rishi Sunak when he was PM. So it was disappointing that the same money had been re-announced a year and a bit later, which now means that actually there's less that can be delivered as a result of inflation in that time period. The point that I made in response to yesterday's announcement was the fact that we need to make sure we're operating in areas where people live and work, as opposed to arbitrary boundaries of combined authorities. We obviously have a lot of people who live in Harrogate but might work in Leeds and vice versa. So having a Leeds mass transit network is great for people. It won't serve those who have those cross-border journeys.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Just with reference to the works going on at the hospital, I think we're obviously all pleased to see those works progressing. But I'm slightly confused because the work to demolish the parts of the hospital with rack concrete had actually started. The demolition had started before the general election. So I'm confused why you were claiming credit for securing the funding for it, when, in fairness, you didn't have anything to do with that. I actually spoke to people within the finance team at Harrogate that were furious that you took credit.
Thank you for that. I think it's really interesting because obviously Liberal Democrats campaign all year round, and I was campaigning well outside the general election period too, running a campaign and petition to make sure that that funding was secured. So I think that's probably an inadvertent misrepresentation that I didn't do anything before by Councillor Harrison. I think when I speak to people on the ground and the conversations that we have, people felt that the previous MP had been railroaded into campaigning on the issues and was very much campaigning on the narrative and the agenda that we set, whether that be sewage, whether that be health and NHS. I mean, I meet regularly with the local hospital and the staff there, and they're really appreciative of the work. So any conversations that he's had, I'm quite happy to get in touch with the hospital and hear what they've got to say, but it's probably a misrepresentation, and I don't think they'll appreciate being dragged into a council meeting like this.
Just to come back, I was making the point that the works had already started, the funding was secured, and the people I spoke to were furious. So I don't think that's a misrepresentation.
I think just on that, it is
sorry,
not...
Sorry, I think I'll ask the question.
Yes.
You're given the answer. Please, Chair.
Yes.
I think out of courtesy, we should move on.
I agree. And points have been made on both sides. I'm sure there's merit in both sides, and you can perhaps have a chat afterwards. I'm going to go to Councillor Ward.
Thanks. So I know you have a regular meeting with North Yorkshire, which is really welcome. And the two topics that I'm just going to mention, I know you've done some work, but I just wonder if we could see if we can do some further work with them. So North Yorkshire do seem to have a habit of not spending money in the local area. So there was obviously the Tinseltown filming, which was great that Knaresborough got that. There was £10,000 that came to the council as part of that filming, and unfortunately we weren't able to use that money in Knaresborough. We did start a campaign, and I know we've asked, but I just wonder if we could put that on the table again and as part of the regular meetings. We have huge issues with the toilets in Knaresborough. It's a tourist town. That money could clearly be spent on those toilets. It could be spent on other things. I've been made aware recently that a local business, she provides a fantastic service, which is a toilet changing facility, which anybody who comes to the town can use, which is great. But I do think it's slightly embarrassing that the town doesn't have something, that people can use. So if we could get that money invested in baby changing or just improving the toilets, that would be really welcome. And the other thing, and I know you've helped us move things along, which is the Knaresborough market. So the town council are still working hard at that. We've put our business case into North Yorkshire Council, but it would really help as part of that whole process if the town council could secure the market charter. That would really help push things forward. So if we could just make sure those two items are on the agenda, that'd be really helpful. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for that. This was something that I raised, I think it was about a week or two ago, 2 weeks ago at Business Questions, about the fact that we'd had this local government reorganisation and we were promised local decision making. And in reality, what we've seen has been a power grab by North Allerton when it comes to those decisions that are now been taken about our local area, like things like Knaresborough Market. This is something that could have been set up straight away, the powers could have been handed across, and it feels very much like there's been the dragging of feet on that and other issues too. I completely understand and appreciate the frustrations. I share them too. I think it's really, really frustrating for local residents when they had previously paid higher council tax to HBC. We had millions in reserves that were then taken into the general sort of slush fund of North Yorkshire Council. And then when it comes to the fact that you can't even get the money from filming in Knaresborough to go back to the local town, I think that's, to me, emblematic of the problem that we have with North Yorkshire Council. When we go out and speak to people, they feel that the new super council, as they were dubbed at the time, is not so super, and that we've lost our voice. And that's why I was really pleased to see at least Harrogate got its town council. Obviously, Knaresborough's had one for a little while longer, and I would like to see those powers passed over, and I'm absolutely happy to work with members to try and facilitate that in the most expedient way and to make sure that they get a fair deal when it comes to things and services that they might want to take on.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Gibbs.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Tom, for your presentation. Just want to pull out something that you touched upon in your opening statement, because one of your main pledges throughout the election was action on the cost of living crisis. I think something that everybody can agree with from across the board. Your election leaflets did specifically say if you vote Lib Dem on the 4th of July, it's a vote to reduce the cost of living, to cut food and energy bills. So I just want to know, how's that going and what have you done? In your opening statement, you touched it briefly, but you mentioned ABR and BPR, which, in fairness, have only really been things that have been on the agenda since the election, and therefore, I'm assuming weren't part of your plans when speaking on the issue before the election.
I think there's a general consensus that we operate and react to events as they happen, which is exactly what we've been doing. In terms of support for local businesses, that's something that we've been campaigning on. I've been repeatedly calling for investment both from North Yorkshire Council, from the Combined Authority and from government too. When we talk about the cost of living, that categorises and can be looked at different ways for different people. If you look at, for instance, the government are now talking about scrapping the two-child benefit cap, which is something that the Liberal Democrats and myself have campaigned on repeatedly and for years, and have raised that in Parliament. So actually one of the quickest ways we could actually alleviate poverty and childhood poverty would be using mechanisms like that, which if that happens, I'm sure Councillor Gibbs would love to give me credit for that.
Thank you. I have Councillor Aldred. I'm just checking if there are any other questions. Yes. And two other questions. Thank you. Oh, more. Okay.
Welcome, Mr. Gordon. It's lovely to see one of my local residents in the chamber, or whenever they do appear here. Can I bring us back to the localism issue and the most local council claim and the super council in Northallerton? And I wouldn't disagree with much of your analysis there. I'd like to ask you a question about something you didn't touch on, but I felt was very important at the time. I referred to it as the winter of discontent, and it was that couple of weeks in early January when Harrogate really ground to a standstill. We had snow, we had ice. We get that in winter. It's in a northern climate. And HBC, to their credit, and NYC, when they were county council, seemed to be able to clear footpaths, clear roads, and towns and villages did operate previously. But I've never known a situation during my time in Harrogate where we weren't really operating as an economic entity in the town centre. And I'd like to congratulate you and your team for putting information out there, because I think I saw kind of weekly, sometimes daily updates on the situation. North Yorkshire weren't doing that, but your office did. 6 months later down the line, we were promised a report, a lessons learned report from North Yorkshire Council, particularly our highways executive. It's now June, no sign of that report. So the question is, if you were to produce a lessons learned report based on that experience, what do you think the lessons learned might be?
Thank you for that. And the acknowledgement, we were sending out quite frequent updates. And in fairness to North Yorkshire Council, when I met with the leader and the chief executive about a week after the initial snowfall, which then subsequently turned to sort of ice very quickly and took ages to remove, they sort of did acknowledge that they were too slow, that by the time the gritters had been out, it was already too late and it already started to freeze and the snow land. I think at the time when we had that meeting, I was reassured that there would be lessons learned. But again, I don't believe that my office have had any correspondence on any sort of takeaways from it. There seemed to be a lack of coordination between the different areas. You know, when the snow had cleared in Northallerton, you know, it would simply make sense to reallocate some of that resource to areas that were still badly affected. We had a number of people who actually got in touch who had ended up at Harrogate Hospital as a result of falling on ice that otherwise might not have happened. You know, we know that the main roads, which were meant to be gritted, usually had at least one side of a footpath gritted, but that just hadn't happened. And I had a number of people, constituents as well, who got in touch who simply couldn't go out and get their medication from the pharmacy or couldn't get it delivered. So I think there does need to be a wider conversation about the responsibilities of local authorities when it comes to inclement weather like that. I think that's also comparable to the situation we saw in Knaresborough before I was elected with the flooding. The initial response was actually quite good, but the follow-up was not there. And that's certainly what local people said. My office and I held a meeting with councillors and local constituents over there to gather that feedback. We can certainly look to collate the information that I got from that period and try to pass that across to local councillors and also to the council too. I think the main takeaways really would be we need to be more proactive and that there's probably points to be made about the centralisation of services doesn't always deliver a better service.
Thank you. Actually, you've touched on it already, and it's a flooding incident in Knaresborough and some parts of Harrogate too. We're still waiting for the independent report that's being facilitated by North Yorkshire Council, and I just wondered whether that was something you'd be happy to chase up with your next correspondence with Councillor Carles and Richard Flinton.
Absolutely happy to do that. There was a bit of concern about the independent review that was being carried out and report into the flooding incidents, principally that we were advised and given a date for the publication of the report, but yet when we spoke to people who had been affected by flooding, they'd not been consulted, which seemed to be a glaring oversight. I think in any instance of such events, it's really important to actually understand what has happened and collate that evidence. When residents were telling us that they'd not been involved in that report and that process and that feedback from the flooding, that really did ring alarm bells. I think, it's really important to say thank you to the people who were first on the scene and helped. That was a combination of officers, councillors, town councillors too. And like I say, it was, people at Chain Lane as well who really sort of went above and beyond what could be expected. There are still people now who aren't back at home who have a year on, still had their lives turned upside down. There's been issues now with insurance claims and trying to get home insurance. There were worries about if that report does designate an area as flood prone, then that will have adverse implications on when it comes to the sale of property down the line. And I think it's really important to say that not all of the flooding happened as a result of gully cleansing. I think that's, really clear. But from what we've seen and what we've heard, some of it could have been better mitigated if there'd been a regular schedule of such gully cleansing. There were still people months after the flooding where they said that the gullies hadn't been cleaned. They were still silted up and blocked. And I think that's something that, as part of this report, I hope North Yorkshire Council address going forward. But absolutely happy to pick that up and loop in local members on that.
Thank you. Councillor Windus, comes to you next.
Thank you, Chair. Please excuse my back. What is your opinion on a proposal for an asphalt plant to be built at the side of the Allerton Waste Recovery Park, which is due to go to the Planning Committee next week? I've been inundated with concerns from residents of local villages of the noxious and toxic fumes which will come from that, plus an extra 90 vehicle movements a day. What is your opinion on that, please?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's one that I was surprised, actually. I asked this question to my staff yesterday about whether we'd had anyone email in about it, and it's not a single email that I've had correspondence on. But happy to say, I think, for me, there is a balance between trying to make sure that we have needed industry like asphalt plants and the location of them. The site it's located on is brownfield, which I think is obviously much more preferable than green belt. I do take into account the problem that we've got with the planning system as it is that there is no real tangible way in which local people's voices is heard. My view on it is that I can understand why people would not want that in close proximity to the house, into their homes. I do think, on balance, having it next to the A1 is much better than having it in the middle of a town centre. I think there's pros and cons on both sides. If it was down to me and I had a vote at the planning committee, I'd probably be inclined to vote against it. But as an MP, I have no formal statutory process, involvement in the statutory planning process. my voice, my objections, my support, any comments is given the same way as a local resident. And I think the guidance that I would offer councillors and local town councillors, parish councillors in the area is to contact North Yorkshire Council and the planning officers and make sure that their voices are heard. I think, like I say, if I was living there, I probably would be inclined to not want an asphalt plant on my doorstep too.
I have one final question, I believe, from Councillor Gibbs.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Tom, just one from me. What do you want to be judged on? Again, apologies for my back being to you, so I can speak into mine. What do you want to be judged on by the end of this Parliament? What do you want to have achieved for the constituency? We've heard lots about meetings, lots about things you're campaigning on, all great. But what will actually be delivered so that if you're sitting here in a couple of years' time at one of these annual meetings, you've got a record of action that you can put to us?
I thank Councillor Gibbs for that question. It's actually a really nice way to end. I think this is exactly the point. It's about not just being, Westminster's voice in Harrogate and Knaresborough, but being Harrogate's voice in London, and that's exactly what we're doing already. I think if we look at what we've achieved in a year, I'm really positive and really optimistic that we will have things that are tangible. I look to the 3G pitch over in Knaresborough, securing a meeting with a minister in the first 6 months, managing to get the Football Foundation out, and now helping to fundraise that the remainder of the money needed to complete that. That is something tangible. That is something we can point to. That is something we can celebrate to the benefit of residents in Knaresborough when it comes to sport and leisure. When we look at things like Harrogate College, there was no guarantee that that money, that £20+ million, a combination of grants and loans, would be secured. That was by me making sure I had a meeting with the Minister of the day, with the Skills Minister, securing that funding. I know Councillor Gibbs has been a bit more on the fence about whether he supports the expansion of Harrogate College and the redevelopment. I'm really in favour of making sure that we've got the best opportunities and skills for our young people. So I think, again, securing £20+ million of funding for a college and for skills and young people is really important. Securing provision of facilities and leisure is really important. And again, I think the way in which I'm trying to make sure that I do my job is by being there, by being involved in the community, by being seen. Whenever I go into town, people stop me and say thank you for the over 8,000 bits of casework we've now nearly dealt with in my office already in less than a year. And I think as well, the fact that, there's local community events and any MP can turn up, but to get involved is different. To be part of it is different. I don't want to be categorised as someone who turns up just for the photo and leaves. I can remember when I went to the Business Awards at Reading Park and then actually spent the entire evening there, and people went, "Oh, you've stayed and you've had a drink and you're actually a normal person." I think, to me, that's what we need politicians to be. If we're going to try and combat the rise of cynicism and the threat to democracy that I would say that our country currently faces, then it's about being authentic. It's about showing those tangible things that we can do and by being relatable. I try to run to stay fit. That's increasingly difficult and challenging to fit that into my schedule, but I was really chuffed, quite frankly, that there was such a groundswell of support and that I was able to raise thousands of pounds for Open Country to go towards their new electric minibus, and also to cover the £1,000 towards the heating cabinet for vital equipment that Harrogate Hospital wanted. So to me, it's about making sure that there are those tangible things we can do, using my platform and my position to help other people lift themselves up too. And I think we're already delivering on that.
Supplementary question.
It's more of a point of clarification, Chair. Tom mentioned some misrepresentation earlier, so I'd just like to put on record that I think there's just been a little bit there. If anybody wants to look through the minutes of the meeting or the live stream of the planning committee meeting last year, I was not on the fence about Harrogate College. I think my opening words were, I fully support this application. So I think any insinuation that I didn't is a slight misrepresentation.
Thank you for that clarification.
Can I just ask a question? I'm slightly confused because earlier I wasn't allowed to respond to something, but yet we seem to have councillors here able to respond to.
They've been points of clarification. I think have been fine.
I wasn't referring to the planning process last year. I was talking about the abstention at the meeting for the Harrogate College redevelopment recently.
Okay, right. Right. Okay. Thank you. And thank you, Tom, once again for a comprehensive review of what you've been doing. And thank you for the comments and questions coming from the floor. We will move on to our next item.
At the start, you said about there might be the opportunity to
I
wrap up.
did. You're absolutely right. Would you like to sum up?
I would do. Thank you very much, Chair.
I'm sorry. I'm learning at this job. If I promise, I need to keep it.
No, and again, I would just really reiterate the point that I made at the start of my term after the election and again earlier in this meeting. I want the best for our area. If there is anything in which I can do to help local councillors, they know that the contact details are online. Many of them have got my personal phone number. That is something that I'm committed to do, to work with people, cross parties and non, to make sure we've got the best for our local area. And again, I think, you know, as was made and pointed out in the last question, sort of judge me on my record. And I think on that, we'll continue to campaign on issues like health services going forward, on the issues that we've got with sewage and on the cost of living. I'm really pleased at the first year and the fact that we've made solid progress in a number of areas. And again, the feedback that we get is that we seem to be hitting the sort of the right note and the right mark. And that people have noticed that they voted for change and change has been delivered. And I think that, again, it's incumbent on us all to make sure that whilst we might have differing views, differing political views, that we don't allow politics to drag down the institutions that we're all elected to, whether it be Town Council, North Yorkshire Council or Parliament. I think there's a real level of apathy towards politicians of all parties and at all levels of government at the moment. And I think that is something that if we do not combat, it will be to the detriment of our local residents and society. And I think in an increasing age of fake news and disinformation, it is incumbent for people to be bold and stick their head above the parapet and stand up for what is right, not what is easy. And that's exactly how I intend to be an MP and go forward. And I'm sure there are many people here across parties who share that same view and that same value. And to that point, I think it's probably just circling back to a point raised earlier in this meeting. I will continue to campaign for the £15 million of money that's needed to remove all the rack at the hospital that has not been secured.
Thank you very much. We've made reasonable time, 11 o'clock. It's an important item on our annual agenda to hear from our MP. So thank you again, Tom, and thank you for the comments and questions. We will move on to item number 8 on our agenda, which is the Community Safety Annual Report. So I'd like to thank 4 colleagues who are here. Julia Stack, Community Safety and CCTV Manager, Evie Griffiths, Senior Community Safety Officer, Inspector Holly Nichols from North Yorkshire Police and Sergeant Steve Dougal from North Yorkshire Police. Thank you for the report that has been circulated, so people have had a chance to read them, and for the data contained. And it's, you know, the only issue for me was I wasn't quite sure of the geography bits, but you've given a really good detailed data, and some of the questions might relate to patches that people represent. But I won't anticipate that. Can I ask who's going to lead off? Is Julie? Thank you. And by all means, sort of share the platform with your colleagues. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Chair. So the report that we've presented today just gives you a bit of an overview in terms of what's happening from a community safety point of view. So there's sort of the operational work, and then also the report covers some of the strategic side of things from a community safety partnership North Yorkshire wise. So just wanted to touch on a few of the local issues just to sort of highlight those. So there's some common themes there that members can see with regards to sort of the antisocial behaviour that's taking place across the piece, and what Evie and the team have sort of tried to sort of give you is a real sort of flavour of sort of some of the personal stuff that we're actually involved in on a day-to-day basis. And I think the emphasis from the team on a local basis is really around that early intervention and that sort of getting quite personal, getting to understand what's happening within our local communities. We are very proactive in terms of using the tools and powers that are available to us, and we've had a recent closure order in the Harrogate area in relation to a particular problem premises on the Jennyfield estate. So that is closed for a period of 3 months. So at the time of writing this report, we didn't have the details on there, but we've just sort of closed that property. Members will be aware of the street aid project that has been running for a number of years. We're going to be sort of rejuvenating and relaunching that in the autumn, and we're working closely with the conference centre in terms of probably installing an additional tap terminal to get additional donations there. But that continues to be we receive regular donations and then are in the process of rejuvenating, asking our colleagues to bid for funding around that work. So another key piece of work for Evie and the team is around Project Spotlight, which is Harrogate Town Centre based, and that is really focusing on activity within the town and working closely with our colleagues at the bid and treatment services and Harrogate Homeless Project in particular with regards to that. Other sort of aspects in there, lots of community engagement, which I know, and when we're working within communities, we do try our best to link in with yourselves across the district. Specific thing wanted to sort of just, we've highlighted within the report, which is a project that Evie led on county-wide, was to secure the funding for the bleed kits that will be rolling out across North Yorkshire. And then we've actually got 11 sites pending within our footprint here. And then you'll see on there, I've talked about it previously when I've come to the committee around the knife bins, and we were the pilot for North Yorkshire, and again secured funding to roll that out across North Yorkshire. And then you can see there the positive numbers of bladed items being recovered into the bins. You know, we will always have some of the items being in the bins being quite sort of significant. However, you know, we are seeing a lot of disposable of items that may well come from kitchens, but it's much better to have those items disposed of properly rather than just sort of discarded. So some real positive figures there in terms of collections of items there. And again, we work really closely with our neighbourhood policing teams with regards to that particular initiative. So from a strategic point of view, just highlighting there, from a community safety partnership perspective, domestic abuse remains one of the thematic sort of key areas of work. And locally, again, Evie and her team supported the Stalking Awareness Week, where they were based in Asda in the town centre. And then there's planned work around safeguarding as well that's coming up specifically in that week. It doesn't mean that the rest of the year the team isn't working. It's just that those are quite focused weeks of activity and promotion. But I think one thing for me I've learned over the years is actually it's really good to have that regular engagement with our communities, because we get lots of information shared with us when we're actually out and about doing our activity. Nighttime economy, that is a particular focus for this particular area, and North Yorkshire Police are just developing a nighttime economy strategy, which the community safety team and the CCTV team are key to in the sort of as that's rolling out in the coming months. Also touching on the extremism agenda. Meetings have been set up and groups established across North Yorkshire, and what we've got illustrated in the report there is the particular sort of work that's ongoing there. Martin's Law, a key piece of legislation that's coming, and we are working closely with premises that have a greater capacity of 200 to make sure that we have clear terrorism sort of activities in place there to prevent any risks moving forward. From a CCTV and business crime point of view, we continue to lead on running the Harrogate district, and that includes sort of Ripon. No, you don't cover Ripon, but it does for us, and covers Knaresborough in terms of the business crime partnership. So that's led by the Ben Harrison, who is works in CCTV, and we continue to have significant numbers of partners involved from the business community in terms of retail and nighttime economy, and for that particular initiative. Quite a big development area for CCTV at the moment. The control room at North Allerton, because the council is selling the building at Stone Cross, and we're in the process of moving the control room activity into the Harrogate CCTV control room. So we sort of did quite a lot of work in terms of the feasibility as to whether that would come to Harrogate or to Scarborough, and it's coming to the control room here in Harrogate. So it will actually enhance the offer that's currently available, because as members know, the service at Harrogate is a 24-hour service, whereas the service at North Allerton wasn't. So we will see an uplift in terms of that capacity, with the aim of having all of those camera feeds coming through to Harrogate by the end of August. Again, we're sort of working with North Yorkshire Police in terms of that move specifically. And then from a CCTV point of view, there has been some early dialogue with the Deputy Mayor in terms of discussing the strategic direction of CCTV across North Yorkshire. So that is very at the early stages, but that is a key development area for the service. So that's sort of from the sort of the council community safety perspective, and I'm going to hand over to Holly and Steve, who are going to give you a little bit of an update from a North Yorkshire Police perspective.
Thank you, Julie. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Holly Nichols. I'm the Harrogate Outer Neighbourhood Inspector, but I do some work quite heavily with Harrogate Inner as well. I think it's really important for me to thank everybody in the room. I work really closely with our elected members, and I've got a fantastic relationship with them, and they support me massively within the community, sharing local concerns, and also my colleagues and stakeholders within the Community Safety Hub. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do within the community. So I really thank you for that active, positive communication that we have between us. It's really important to me and my team. So as part of North Yorkshire Police, we've had a lot going on recently in relation to a review around neighbourhood policing and what that looks like. I'm sure many of you are aware that there is the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee Framework that's recently been published around how we are going to be delivering neighbourhood policing within our communities. And reading I was quite thankful for the framework, in honesty, and actually we are doing an awful lot of that already. But what it will do is bring some structure in how we can present the data and results for you in relation to that. So I'll touch on what we're going to be doing about the Neighbourhood Policing Guarantee and some of the changes that are going to be happening within the organisation. So there's a real drive to get police back out on the beat and within the communities. That's something I'm really passionate about visibility within the communities and working with it. And I will also be alongside Mr Tom Gordon in the bed race this year, and being really heavily involved in the bed race from an engagement perspective. I think it's really important for us to be out in our communities and doing that. We have, for us, for Harrogate Inner and Outer, we've set up an op guarantee mass log where we are holding teams to account and making sure that we've got staff out there, on market days, nighttime economy, out visiting the pubs, and out there with retail crime as well. So we've actually getting some tangible data, asking for people to record it and doing plans along with our community safety colleagues to be really out there, so we are in the right places. So community-led policing, about having a named police officer, that's always been something in North Yorkshire Police. I'm really passionate about being the face of the team. We have recently updated all our websites, so there's photographs back on there, and there's a real drive to push those priorities and have that communication with the community. So for Harrogate Outer, you said we did. We go and do leaflet drops and door knock effectively with our communities to find out what's happening and mattering to those people, and the idea being that we can actually report back. There's a lot of feedback often with the police that we're very good at solving the issue, but actually people talk to us and we don't really give the information back. And that's about bridging that gap, really, on our websites. I'm committed to really working this year on our social media platforms, Facebook and other methods, because I think it's a really good way to do it, but not withholding the fact we have rural communities as well within Harrogate Outer, and also reaching those people and still kind of leaflet drops and going out and being there and speaking to people and having surgeries at shops and things can be a really positive way to engage with people. Antisocial behaviour, for any of you that have worked really closely with me, I'm pretty zero tolerance around behaviours of young people and persistent repeat antisocial behaviour. I live in the area myself, so it has a huge impact on our communities and for your constituents. So for me, we are really passionate on that. Work really, again, closely with the Community Safety Hub to identify very early repeat behaviours, repeat victims, repeat offenders, repeat locations, so we can get in there really early. And what that looks like is a master log where we can run it like a crime. So it's an investigation effectively into the methodology behind the problem and how we can tackle that. And we've had some really positive results. So, for example, in Ripon, we had a huge issue with the use of e-bikes, which then we solved in Ripon and pushed it into Knaresborough. And in Stockwell Estate, we've had that quite significantly. And we made some positive arrests last week and issued Section 59 notices, which effectively means that we can then next time take their vehicles off them. So it's just thinking outside the box. It's not always about arresting people. And with young people, obviously, we always want to divert them from criminality. So some of these alternative diversionary schemes are really, really useful and powerful to us. But we can't do that without the community, because a lot of the information comes from the likes of Mr Walker, Councillor Goslow, and from our community. So it's really important that we can support that. So that's great. Safer town centres. So again, I'm sure Sergeant Dougal will update you in relation to the stuff that's been going on in relation to the town centre, because some absolutely outstanding work's been going on with the Community Safety Hub and with colleagues around the town centre. But for Harrogate Outer, we've still got Knaresborough. You know, we've got the retail crime, and there is has been highlighted that actually retail crime is really important. We've got a lot of businesses in Knaresborough actually, and in some of our, Borough Bridge, that are owned by individuals. So retail crime can have a huge impact on the community and those retailers. So it's a dedication and a promise from me really that the team will be out there, and we're really heavily scrutinised actually around taking retail crime really seriously, making prompt arrests, conducting sufficient investigations and making sure we can get those detected at the earliest opportunity. So I'll run through some data for you in relation to Harrogate Outer and just kind of highlight a few issues. So if you've got the document in front of you, it's giving you the last 90 days data in relation to the ASB and nuisance. So kind of my highest area at the moment was in Borough Bridge, where we've had 25 reports of nuisance, and there was quite a lot of concern from the local community. We do have a number of young people in that location that are causing us quite a challenge at the moment. But again, working with the local councillors, they've recently set up a Mooga, and we've got Inspire Youth working there, and the police are very heavily involved in working in that. And we are working with the young people and actually have a problem-solving plan around the antisocial behaviour in Borough Bridge, highlighting the individuals that are involved and being really robust about our actions in relation to those identified individuals. NES has been really good for us over the last 18 months, really. We've seen a massive drop in antisocial behaviour, and that's owing to the fact we had a problem-solving plan in relation to Knaresborough House, which was targeted significantly for criminal damage and is an area of ASB. Because of the locality of it and the fact it's a nice place to sit and for people to congregate, I'm not saying we're going to eradicate it completely, but actually we have put a problem-solving plan in place. We know when it happens, we'll get police officers out there to engage with those young people. Stockwell Estate, again, we are seeing a slight rise in antisocial vehicle use again. Again, as I said, we made an arrest a couple of weeks ago, issued a Section 59 notice, and since then we've had no further reports, so we'll be keeping a really close eye on that. And my colleagues will be going out and doing door knocks ahead of the bed race to make sure people know that we'll be out and about looking for them. So another massive area of concern for us is around the child exploitation, criminal sexual exploitation, and CCE. So we work really closely with the perpetrators that are identified, and we have what's called a 4P plan, which is basically a plan around how we deal with those individuals. We have a number of children who live on our area who sadly are involved in that, and it ties in with our county lines. For us in Knaresborough Bridge area, we have 3 kind of main mapped and scored organised crime groups, which is the county lines. We've had some really positive work around there. In fact, we made an arrest 2 weeks ago, and one of the main nominals is actually wanted on recall for prison, which is a really great result, and that will see him see the rest of his term out in prison, which will have a huge impact on the local community. But we have officers working really closely with those young people, and my team are out daily targeting those individuals. Operation Pony is a pony and trap racing, which caused quite significant disruption actually to the community of Dishforth. Really challenging to manage owing to the nature of it, but clearly causes quite a significant issue on the road network up there. We've got a problem-solving plan again in place with that, with working with neighbouring police forces who also have similar issues, working with our colleagues in the Community Safety Hub to look at CBOs and other ways that we can manage that, because actually to prove the dangerous driving aspect of it can be quite challenging, and looking at those people. But thankfully it does seem to be seasonal. It's at the beginning of the year and then it drops off, but we're aware of it, and this year's been much better for reporting. We've had a lot less reports. I've touched on op electricity. Op Respond is our response to burglaries, and basically what we do. So that very much is on prevention and early intervention. So in the summer, people leaving windows open, leaving doors open, we'll actually go out and try people's doors, and if we can open the door, we'll leave a leaflet with a footprint on and say, lock your door, and doing things like property marking, and every month my team go out and knock on all our known burglars' doors, and I send them a Christmas card at Christmas just so they know that we know who they are, and say that we'll be out looking for them. With the Appleby Horse Fair, we often see some of the travelling community on our area. We have had them in Knaresborough, had them up in Massam. We had quite a significant issue a few years ago. We're out there and about, just again working with the community, target hardening the areas and sort of offering advice. But again, the Community Safety Hub and the council team are absolutely superb in the support of that. Operation Tracksuit, we identified in Tockwith and Green Hamilton a series of theft from motor vehicles where an unknown group were coming to us and they came kind of each month, trying loads of door handles, trying to get into properties. So for me, that's a series, and if we identify a series, we always set up an operation so we can then tackle it. So that means we get I put in a bid in so we can get more resources. So we got in ops, we got in dogs, a real focus for my team to be out on plane and high visibility patrols in the area. We did a community engagement event actually Tuesday this week in the area to talk about what we're doing in there, and give some more awareness, sign up for Community Messenger, and thankfully we haven't had anything for 2 months now. So it just shows, with a bit of focus, with support from the Community Safety Hub and putting resources into an area, what a difference it can make. I was speaking to you about Op Guarantee, which is really to support around tackling nighttime economy. In Knaresborough, we're really lucky. We don't have any specific issues, but still, I'm not blind to the fact that there will be drug use. There can be antisocial behaviour off the back of it, and it's still really important to engage with those licensed premises. We work really closely with our licensing team, who support us massively, and the Op Guarantee will make sure that you get some data about where the police officers are going, where they've been, what they're doing on their day-to-day basis. And that's it from a Harrogate Outer perspective. Has anybody got any questions before I hand over to Sergeant Dougal?
You might take questions as a whole, and then you can decide how they're allocated across the team,
Fine,
because they might be
fine.
generic. But
Thank you.
That's probably best. Morning, Council. I'm Sergeant Steve Dougal. I'm one of the neighbourhood sergeants for Harrogate Inner at the moment. Although we are having a bit of shuffle. We've got a new Inspector Greg Davies. Sadly, he's on some training today, so he couldn't attend. And you'll be seeing over the next couple of weeks a move of some of the sergeants. I think Councillor Gibbs was looking at our website a second ago. Yeah. So all the staff of your neighbourhood teams will be on there. They should be on there because I know that I updated it a few weeks ago, but the new sergeant rotation, that needs changing over the next couple of weeks. You've already, I presume that this has been sent out to council. So if we go to Harrogate Inner, as Superintendent Marm Lamb's mentioned, obviously there's an uplift in neighbourhood policing throughout the county. So hopefully we're going to see an extra 4 PCs throughout the beats. That's for Harrogate Inner. So that covers obviously north, town and south, and an increase in PCSOs. That's obviously going to take a while for the recruitment and the training of those officers, but it will be an uplift and hopefully a more visible presence of your neighbourhood teams. The slides that have been presented there, they all relate to ASB within each ward area. It tells us obviously when things are occurring, the numbers over the last 90 days. I'll just pick out maybe Town Centre Low Harrogate is usually the worst, sadly. Obviously it's the busiest for retail theft and nighttime economy incidents, but overall, ASB throughout the Harrogate district is on the down, as is crime. A few of the issues that we're facing at the moment, child exploitation. We've sadly got some of the highest risk victims in our county, and as the report mentions, in particular 3 female victims come to police attention the most, with over 800 incidents, which are often linked, being reported as missing from homes, for example. However, through working with other partners such as social care, the community safety hub, and via MACE, which is a regular meeting between partners, we've seen a significant reduction in number of incidents by ensuring that officers continually engage with them, their families especially, education establishments, and providing support. The aim being obviously to reduce those incidents of missing from home episodes. Our current problem-solving plans and operations that we've got in place for Harrogate Inner. Up Balaclava is the main one. Sadly, we have seen an increase in residential burglaries, theft from motor vehicles, and stolen motor vehicles on the north side of Harrogate, especially Jenner Fields and the Bilton area, which you might know. So last October we created, to tackle this up Balaclava, dealing with the acquisitive crime in Harrogate Inner area, and that is our main command priority for those officers, and that includes all response officers as well. We continue to deploy and target the area with both high visibility and covert officers. You might see more of that over the next coming weeks, because sadly we have had a spike in the last few weeks. Although we've had a number of arrests, investigations are ongoing. We've seen, sadly, a couple of stolen motor vehicles in the last few weeks. Project Spotlight, although on the report it said Up Spotlight, it's Project Spotlight. Obviously that's being centred around the Harrogate Town Centre. So with ourselves and the likes of the Community Safety Hub, we've been trying to increase patrols, work with our partners, especially around Oxford Street and the area of Halifax. I'm sure you're all aware of, in the past, we quite often get an increase in antisocial behaviour reports to police about incidents that are ongoing there. So that's why we've been specifically set up Up Spotlight to deal with those issues. Up Hamlet and Up Magic, neighbourhood team continue to deal with information that comes in regarding county lines, drug activity, and take positive action against those involved. That includes targeted high visibility and plainclothes patrols in known locations. Sadly, we quite often get reports from members of the public, and this is where we get our main reports from, of vulnerable people in the community, vulnerable properties, and we've actually tasked members of staff from the Community Safety Hub, the neighbourhood policing team, to visit these locations, and often, sadly, that does lead to investigations into drug supply. Up Tarlac and Up Vernal, our team continue to work with our religious groups and communities by engaging with community leaders and monitoring any tensions. Sadly, the issues with around Gaza and Palestine, we've obviously had some issues of anti-Semitic incidents that we've had to address, and we're obviously putting extra patrols around the synagogue and communicating with our communities that way. Opceptor and Optivan knife crime, and that's already been mentioned. Obviously, we instigated the knife bin in Harrogate as a pilot. That's been really successful personally. We average, I think, 80 to 90 knives a week going into the Harrogate one, and obviously that's now gone out to Boroughbridge, Ripon and Knaresborough. However, there are other operations in relation to information quite often sadly comes in about children, for example, carrying knives. So we'll put our school liaison officers into the schools to deal with those, speak to those children, education in the form of classroom attendance and lessons towards the children of the area. I've already mentioned our vulnerable victims. It's fairly apparent that sadly some of those committing crime and those being cuckooed by the county lines, are in certain properties, and that's why ourselves, the Community Safety Hub, have been trying to actively visit on the odd occasion, whenever they're in the area, just knock on the door and check that they're okay, or if not, sadly, sometimes obviously it leads to warrants being executed, which I'm sure you've seen the Op Tornado material that we put out on the internet recently. We had a house in Jennerfields that was subject to a warrant and then, as Julie has mentioned, a closure order. So that house is now vacant. Is it 6 months? 3. And I guess, I'm presuming that will go to another tenant eventually. So priorities, once again, for our officers are Op Balaclava, Op Respond, which is a county-wide operation to target burglaries and deal with them more effectively. So, for example, ensuring crime scene investigators attend. Safeguarding our most vulnerable in the town centre and the Harrogate. Operation Hotspot, we've not mentioned that one. That's national money from central government for extra patrols in areas that are identified specifically for ASB. So, as I've already mentioned, Oxford Street, for example, is visited by extra patrol officers from around the county because of that extra money that's come in from central government. Project Spotlight I've mentioned, and also retail crime is a priority within all town centres now. Obviously, sadly, throughout the country, we've seen an increase in retail theft. So we've specifically designated 3 police officers for our county command to focus centrally on dealing, gathering evidence and obviously dealing with the suspects from those offences. Sadly, John Pepper's moved on, but he's had a massive increase, and he was up to virtually 50% detection rates on retail theft just for Harrogate. And I presume we'll go to some questions maybe next.
We done? Good. Thank you very much for that input. We have a number of questions. I'll probably reserve mine then until later. Whose hand did I see first? I don't know who's. Chris, Councillor Aldred.
Thank you very much, Chair. I might have had to declare that and I didn't, so I'll just say I'm in a quite privileged position because I'm a member of the Police, Crime and Fire Committee, so I get to meet with the likes of the Chief Constable quite regularly, and indeed the Deputy Mayor. In fact, the basis of my question is, I was involved or invited to Northallerton a couple of months back, and there was an informal morning where we were told about some of the operations going on county-wide. And it was great to be there because there was just so much passion in that room from the Chief Constable down. And various kind of operations were the type of thing we can't really talk about in committee because committee is obviously a public scenario, but it was an informal meeting, so it really got into depth about some of the operations going on, fraud, retail crime, as you say. And I was really impressed by a couple of things in Scarborough. There's one project, and I can't remember. Is it called Build and Grow? Build somewhere. It's a particular state. Holly knows what.
Was it Clear Hold Build?
Clear Hold Build, yeah. And I understand that's a prototype in Scarborough at the moment.
I can talk about Clear Hill Builds. So Clear Hill Builds, an analogy that was used, and it was first used in Manchester Police, and it is talking about where we have an organised crime group in an area, and often what happens, old school policing, you'd go in, do the old school policing, knock some doors in, arrest some offenders, lock them up, but then very quickly the infrastructure in the community aren't in a place, so that's very quickly vacuumed with another group. So you never really break the cycle of organised crime, so it continues. So in Scarborough, they've got some really highly scoring mapped and scored OCG. So for those of you who don't know what we do with an organised crime group, when there's a group identified, it goes through a matrix basically where they're scored on the threat and risks. That's based on things like, are they exploiting children? Is there guns involved? What's the violence involved with that gang? So the Clear Hole Build analogy is something that we use. So on a very smaller scale, we do that locally as well, although might not be under the Clear Hold Build analogy. We did it with Hamlet, which was has been a really massive success. Operation Hamlet was a really high risk OCG in the Harrogate area, involving a lot of children, a lot of vulnerability. The team, the closure order, that has links with it, so looking at all the different avenues we can disrupt that. And based on that, we've had an individual who's now received a longer sentence, and my team locally in the Knaresborough area have been working really hard to prevent anybody coming back into the area. So although the Clear Hole Build is an analogy that we use all the time, and it's about making sure that once we've arrested people, put them behind closed doors, no one else comes and takes over that, because that's where the real violence starts. When you start getting violence between rival lines or rival gang members, that's when we see it. So we work really closely in it. So at the moment, Sergeant Dougal talked about Operation Magic, and that is kind of a splinter group from the Operation Hamlet, and very quickly we're mapping and scoring that to make sure that group don't take that place that Hamlet was, so we don't let it get to that level, if that makes sense. So we do adopt those principles all the time here. It might just not be under the Clear Hold Build signage, if you like.
Yeah, that was you've answered part of my question, which was, are we going to try some of the things there in Harrogate? And we obviously are.
We are doing all the time, yeah, and it's thanks to our colleagues in the community safety. So like closure orders on a property where we're seeing really high vulnerability, and an area where drugs and criminality can go on, where people are exploited, by using those powers, which is, so I can't describe to you how much work goes into getting a closure order in place. It's obviously really intrusive of an individual. So loads of work went into that, and that is fantastic because we're basically shutting it down and stopping that and displacing everybody, and then it makes it easy for us to tackle that then.
Yeah, and I should emphasise that I was involved in the panel when Chief Constable Forbar was appointed. And he was very emphatic on the day in question about neighbourhood policing. He said that was his be-all and end-all, really. And I'm glad to see a year on, that is progressing, and there is a much greater emphasis on neighbourhood policing in the North Yorkshire Force, I think, than there was previously, and that's great. Can I just finish my question? So, Clear Hole Build, brilliant, neighbourhood policing working. I just wanted to ask your opinions, really, particularly Steve, maybe, on Harrogate Town Centre. And there has been some kind of debate previously within this room and outside it at the task force, which Tom was mentioning earlier. Scarborough did have the public space protection orders. I think it might still be in force. And there was some kind of movement within the retailers in town, particularly the bid, to get that in Harrogate as well. Do you think that's kind of appropriate, or have we moved on from that?
It needs to be constantly reviewed. The bid obviously came to the community safety of the police asking for a PSPO. And the data, just looking at all the incidents, the type of incidents that was happening, it wasn't deemed sufficient by council that a PSPO should be created. And that's why, for one reason, Project Spotlight was created, so that officers were directed. They always are, because sadly we quite often respond to calls for service, and we do know where they are, and when they attend they deal with any offences that are seen. So the data was gathered over quite a long period. It probably needs to be reviewed constantly. But at the time, the PSPO was deemed not suitable piece of legislation to use. We've got lots of other pieces of legislation, simple of arrests. If there's an allegation of assault, we can go from there. But others, we can, a dispersal notice. So, for example, myself, if I see that there's an issue in the town centre, so at a particular time of night during the week, I can go to the inspector and ask for dispersal, order to be placed. And that obviously limits a time period that we can actually obviously go in as police officers and disperse people if they are causing antisocial behaviour for a set amount of time for a set designated area. Because, traditionally this town, we've seen certain pockets over the years, it used to be what we called the cider bench on the station parade. And last summer especially, it was around the Halifax building. So we've put other initiatives in, so talking with the businesses to try and get the design of the building maybe changed, for examples, but at that specific time, the PSPO was not deemed by council to be the correct tool to use. That may change. We've got to keep it under review.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that. And just to say, thanks for investing in the neighbourhood policing, because I think that is the way to go. And I can detect a passion from you guys and from the Chief Constable downwards as well. And that's great to see.
Thank you. Councillor Gibbs, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's always reassuring to know the police are always watching what I'm. Good job I was watching the cricket highlights or something, wasn't it? Actually, it follows quite nicely on from Chris's comments. Mine was probably more of a comment than a question. It was to do specifically with Operation Spotlight. It was I kind of just want to place on record my thanks. My inbox, probably going back 18 months, was heaving with issues around the Halifax. I think Julia contacted you about it as well, about a PSPO, which we did have at one point. And things, for one reason or another, weren't great in the area. Spotlight, and I'm sure other things linked to it and otherwise, have improved the area around there quite a lot. I know you're working with the council closely. I know you're working with the homeless hostel closely. So I kind of just wanted to put on record my thanks. I mean, the problem hasn't gone away. I would love it to. The reality is it may never fully go away. But I do think that the steps that have been taken have led to a big improvement in the area. The bid seem happier from conversations I've had with businesses that are within the bid. And often, and this isn't a criticism aimed at anybody, but there's a lot of smaller businesses in the town centre that, for obvious reasons, aren't part of the bid. And historically, I think they've felt a little bit left out sometimes. And from speaking with them, they are very happy. In fact, the Chief Inspector, Sam Williamson, came to meet me with some of these smaller businesses last year, I think sometime back end of last year. And yeah, they're a lot happier now than they were. So I just wanted to put on record my thanks for that, because I think it's one of the ones that we can really evidence that what we're doing is not solving every problem. It never will, but it is working.
Thank you. Well, I'll just go on from there then. You were looking at the website earlier. We're all contactable. There's a generic website. Contact the neighbourhood team for Harrogate Inner and Outer. We've got a set email. At the moment, I check it every day when I'm on duty. The other sergeants will. Obviously, yes, you've got the 101 service, 999 for, emergencies. But it's down to people reporting things. If we don't know there's an issue, we can't help solve it. And that's the message we did get specifically out for that area of Harrogate Town Centre. We specifically visited every store, every property to make sure that they were aware. So that's good to know.
Thank you. I've most of you on a list, so don't worry. Councillor Timothy.
Thanks, Chair. Just like to thank the community safety officers and officers of North Yorkshire Police for making the time to join us today. I just wanted to take the opportunity of being here just to ask for some clarification on an issue that I've had conflicting advice on. As you might know, there's an issue currently in my division on stray rain regarding camper vans. Now, clearly, I'm already in dialogue with the Executive Member for Highways on holidaymakers because that is clearly a parking issue, council issue, whatever. Where I wanted clarification was that I've heard from some sources that it is illegal to live on, that is against the law to live on the public highway. And and that is what's happening in some cases. I guess I'm just asking: is that still a North Yorkshire Council issue? Is that a traffic police issue? Like, what would be your advice to me on that?
Okay, with unauthorised encampments, which is what we're talking about, the legislation is quite challenging to navigate. Now, the council are the lead organisation in relation to unauthorised encampments, and the police will only get involved whereby it would start causing an obstruction to the highway, or there's a risk or causing significant harm to the local community. So it depends, in honesty, without knowing the intricacies of it, I think it's best to take it outside the meeting, if I'm honest, to understand what it looks like, where it is, are they occupying it, are they staying there, because it will depend on the circumstances as to who the best lead would be.
Just come in. I think, didn't PC Frith respond to your request on this one, because he sent us an email about it? Was it Stray Raid in particular? Yeah, I know he responded, but the thing is there, in particular to Stray Rain, it's advertised on Park Overnight because you get a lot of people coming into the town, and you're more than welcome to, if there's no legislation preventing it, no advertisements from North Yorkshire Council highways to say you can't park there and sleep in there overnight, you're more than entitled to, but we can discuss it after if you need to.
I think Julia has something to add.
Yeah, it's actually the enforcement team within North Yorkshire Council, so we will take that back to Drew Fussey. They would lead on any sort of encampment side, but we can do that for you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. I've got one question. First of all, thank you for the information that's in the report, because I think the wider public and ourselves to a certain extent, we don't see what the police and the community safety team really are getting up to. So seeing that is really useful. So thank you. Although I'm now questioning why I received a Christmas card. I have to have a think about that. No. In all seriousness, I think this is a question actually for Julia, and I'm not trying to be mischievous here. The recent town council, a lot of councillors who were elected to it were elected on a manifesto promise of strengthening community safety initiatives. So I'm keen to know if the town council was prepared to put their hand in their pocket. Is there something that the council, through your initiatives, would suggest would be a good use of their money? CCTV, night marshals. I don't know, but do you see what I mean? If rather than it just be a statement that it actually was backed with resources, would we have something we'd want to use those resources for?
Yeah, clearly early days with the town council, but I think it's really important that we do sort of get that dialogue, and anything always interested in sort of adding value to what we're already doing. Yes, there would be certain things I would certainly wanting to be looking at, but I think it's about maximising or match funding other pots that we've actually got to do. So I would welcome that dialogue, which I'm sure we will. I've spoken to Iona already, so we're already linked in. We just sort of, we need to enhance that, and I think that, the town council is going to be in a really good position to have those conversations and develop those missing gaps specifically. But I think from a CCTV perspective, we're pretty well covered in the town centre. We're really lucky with that regard. And we also have the additional deployable CCTV camera, which we can put into locations where we might have a gap on a temporary basis. But more than happy to have those dialogues with the town council.
Excellent. Good. Councillor Haslam.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I'm disappointed the police haven't got enough to do, really. You're just doing so much work, so thank you very much on behalf of my residents, and we're very grateful for all the work you do. I just want to pick up on section 4.2 in Julia's report. And this is about, you're going to have a safeguarding week. So this is a request. Earlier this year, I had a couple of really serious county lines child exploitation problems, and the route map to getting support was not transparent. So I would ask at this safeguarding week that perhaps there is help for parents in particular, and also awareness of county lines and how it impacts. So that's really a request for that, and also perhaps for people that are already perhaps on what I'll call the vulnerable list, where, you know, sort of Steve has kindly said that, you know, when they're going past, they knock on the door just to check in on them. But is there some form of alert process? So I had a parent of a child that was being exploited, and she kept contacting people and nobody would take any notice until eventually that person got arrested. Whereas, you know, prevention's much better than cure, I think we could all agree. So one's a request for the safeguarding week, and the second is there an alert service that people who are suffering from these sort of exploitation issues can contact the police or the appropriate authority in that case? Because I appreciate you have right care, right person to deal with as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Haslam. Yes, we can sort of certainly make sure that we're covering all bases on Safeguarding Week. That's absolutely fine. In terms of the alert process, the dedicated resource from an exploitation point of view sits with North Yorkshire Police, but there are some commission services through the Mayor's office, and I think what we need to do is make sure that those services are not necessarily just sort of linking into professionals. You know, they're working on one-to-one with families, but we can probably need to promote those services a little bit more so that people can get that support that they actually need. But there are a number of commission services from the PCC's office that we can make sure people are linked into. But the route in for a victim in the first instance is through North Yorkshire Police.
Can I just...
Yes, to add.
So I guess from my perspective, the first port of call for anybody, I would really strongly advise that they call 101. Now, I do understand they actually had an incident in Knaresborough the other day where a mum came into Knaresborough concerned about a child, but obviously it's still their child. There is some barriers, I think, that probably need to break down, which is really good that you've brought that to my attention, because, again, I had a mum come in and say, I'm really worried about my child. They're acting, they've assaulted me at home, but I don't want to report it because they know ultimately that means we're going to speak to them and it's going to create... So there is quite a challenge for us. We do have a week of action ourselves, week commencing 23rd of June for neighbourhoods. And we've got some focus around vulnerability, CSE and CCE. So I'll liaise with Evie's team and we'll look at kind of bridging the gap there and putting some stuff out on social media around other ways that people can report into us to help break down those barriers. I think you make a really good point around stuff we can improve for parents if they want to report that sort of stuff to us. But they can call 101 and that will create a log, and we take vulnerability really seriously, and it goes into the multi-agency child exploitation meeting as well that we hold once a month.
That's a bit of a conflict, I think, in terms of sort of, you ring the police, it's an incident, it really sort of, but I mean, it's a way in, and it's not a way in that I was offered when I was trying to find help for parents earlier this year. So I'm really interested. The other thing I'd like to link up outside this meeting is I commissioned out of my locality grant courses for schools so that they could spot the people who are potentially going to be exploited. And I would like to be able to link you into that so that perhaps I'm not a believer in reinventing the wheel. I'd like to all contribute. So if you could contact me, if we could just have a chat afterwards, that would be great. But look, thank you very much for the answer, and I'll make sure that people know that 101 is an option. So thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Sorry for coming back without your permission.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I've got two questions. So, Julia, in terms of Martin's Law, if local organisations do need some support with that, is there a named contact, or how do they access that support? And perhaps some of that I might need to perhaps have a chat offline if that's all right. And the second question is about CCTVs and the review that you talked about. Have you got a timescale of how that might work, and are you going to look to engage with town councils and other community groups? Certainly in Knaresborough, I think the residents would welcome a review of their CCTV. The local businesses have got sort of Ring doorbells in their premises, which have worked really well in past incidents where things have cropped up. We do have quite a lot of antisocial behaviour at the castle. and I think the Duchy would welcome spending some of the car parking revenue on some of those things if the council could look at doing that. So those are my two questions, and I'd just like to thank Inspector Nichols for all her and her team do. Embedding yourself in the community has clearly worked. You've shown that the antisocial behaviour has reduced. So thank you for all that you do, and good luck in the Knaresborough Better Race in a couple of weekends' time.
Thank you. So touching on Martin's Law, so there's going to be a number of sort of workshops aimed at specific businesses where you've got that wider capacity need on that. But in the first instance, please come through our team, and then we've got additional support and expertise from a point of view. So that's there. In terms of the CCTV review, it's very early stages. We know we've got to do it. It's huge. So we haven't got any timescales at the moment, but I certainly think that there needs to be almost like an outline produced in the coming months in terms of what needs to be in scope and out of scope and what that involves. And certainly for me, the community engagement and the feedback from businesses and the community is absolutely key to it, and to understand what that actually is. And also with the regards to the CCTV, the CCTV, the key thing is around, you know, our links in with North Yorkshire Police. The council owns and the infrastructure. However, as we've said before, the biggest beneficiary is North Yorkshire Police. So we're wanting to, that's hence why we're linking into the Deputy Mayor in terms of having that much more strategic approach. And I think certainly on CCTV, for me, it's about being quite visionary. You've got to keep moving it forward. You know, there's lots of changes in technology. So for me, it's more like having a 5-10 year plan around CCTV, but then also making sure it's sort of fit for purpose and it's sort of meeting the needs of, particularly on the areas that we've talked about around nighttime economy and retail theft as well. It needs to be what we actually need it to be. So that's absolutely fine. And then in terms of the ASB, you mean in the castle in Knaresborough, that area? Yeah, we can certainly chat to you, and then we can get into sort of any sort of problem solving outside of this. More than happy. Thank you.
Whoops, I have two more questions. I think one from Councillor Slater, one here. Councillor Slater.
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Harrison's question, but rather than focusing on what the Town Council might be able to do, are there services that you feel that are missing that would help support some of the work that you're doing? Obviously, we're seeing a lot of the things that you talk about are antisocial behaviour. Not all of that is from young people. Grown adults are perfectly capable of also being antisocial. I wouldn't want to always point the finger at young people, but I'm conscious that there is not an awful lot in Harrogate in particular. I think Knaresborough actually does better than Harrogate does, generally speaking, for young people. There aren't particularly youth clubs. There aren't an awful lot of activities. Are there things that have worked elsewhere that you think could be set up in Harrogate? Is there something missing?
Well, youth provision would always be useful, but as you've said, I look at all the ASB incidents, for example, and yeah, it's not necessarily younger people committing these offences, and when they are, we, as my inspectors mentioned, we tend to get quite involved with them as quick as we can, as do other groups. But in relation to the older element, maybe committing ASB, you've got definite day and nighttime differences. So your nighttime economy is obviously sadly intoxication, when you realistically you need people maybe in uniform in the area, and that's why we develop our nighttime economy strategy around that. But in the past we've obviously had street angels, groups such as that, voluntary groups in the town. That would be beneficial, I'm sure, for the nighttime economy. During the day, it may be that we could quite easily point at homelessness being a main cause, but is it? I don't think it necessarily is. Those people that are committing those antisocial acts may need some assistance in other parts of their life, but so the services that are available in the town maybe need improving there. So whether that is in relation to alcohol and drug abuse, that's where maybe you should submit some funding.
Thank you. And Councillor Gosler.
Thank you. In your report under funding to partners, you mentioned the work that you've done and continue to do to address the issues around parking outside our primary schools. And I know Matt and myself are really, really grateful for the work you've done in Knaresborough on that, as this is something we're really keen to improve, especially in an effort to encourage more children to travel to school in an active travel way method for the many benefits. Is there anything we can do to support further in this in terms of connection to highways at North Yorkshire?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the links in with our highways colleagues is actually crucial. And I think the initiatives that you're talking about are quite local in terms of actually we've identified a particular issue and we've actually come up with a very, very local problem. In terms of sort of that highways link, it's sometimes more difficult to get big wider decisions made. But yeah, we would certainly welcome any support we can with regards to working with our highways colleagues.
Thank you. Final, hopefully quick question. Noise on social media, which I don't like listening to, but in the context of recent TV programmes, is there any evidence locally of shop fronts that come and go and are actually fronts for other things? And how would you identify those if they were actually happening?
I think you make a really good point. And actually in Knaresborough, I've had a couple of residents contact me around the barbers that we're seeing on the high street. Yes, there can be fronts for criminal groups, and really it's about intelligence for us. So encourage people to write into me, because then I can do it. And what we do, so for example, in our neighbourhood week of action, we've got some focus around op guarantee and our retail crime, and I will ask for licensing to come along and trading standards, and we go and do joint visits at those locations. But it's intelligence, it's members of the community ringing it in to us and raising any concerns. So if people are coming to you and speaking to you about it, raise it with us. You can do that via 101, or raise it with us, and we can allocate a member of staff to go out and speak to them and get the intelligence. And it's about building up a bigger picture. But absolutely, there can be locations of a modern day slavery, exploitation, drugs. So if it doesn't feel right, probably isn't, and we need the information so we can build on that and look to target it and look at action. And we can do that in all sorts of ways with our colleagues in the Community Safety Hub, stakeholders, and as well as ourselves as the police.
Lovely, thank you. And I just want to thank you again for a very comprehensive report. Clearly, we'd love to hear from you maybe in a year's time, but your door is always open, and that's clear from the conversations, the dialogue, and also with colleagues in the town councils now working hard together. So thank you very much for a comprehensive item on our agenda. Conscious we've had 2 hours and that we probably need a 5-minute break before we take the remaining items. I will start again at 10 past on the dot. Thank you very much. Sorry, second, right, okay, we're back on. Thank you for being back promptly. Item 9 on our agenda, locality service update. Again, thank you, Susie, for the comprehensive report. And we'll just leave you to highlight areas that you'd like, and we'll have some questions.
Thank you, Chair. So, as has been said, the report gives an overview of the new localities service, which includes the communities team, the parish liaison and devolution team, and the migrants programme team. I'll give a brief overview of some of the work of the wider service, and then I'll focus on the local communities team work for here in Harrogate. So the team's been operational since the 1st of May last year, and the communities team has a continued focus around prevention, supporting people to live longer, healthier with independent lives within the community, supporting communities to become more resilient and respond to local challenges, and around social regeneration, which is really about ensuring that places where people live create those opportunities and promote well-being and reduce inequalities. There are obviously 3 area teams for us based across the county, and here in Harrogate and Knaresborough we are the central team. Around prevention and reducing health inequalities, there is the Inspire Fund, and you'll notice from within the report that there is a good amount of money that reaches directly into the community from that fund. In 2024-25, 146 projects were supported with a total of around £139,309. Now that was an increase on the year before, so it's a positive step around that funding that money is increasingly reaching the communities. We work around health inequalities, and we've supported work around the Transforming Community Health Programme. There's been a number of successful pilots that took place in 2023 and 24, and a number of those had extensions given to them in 2024 and 25, which enabled community-led projects to support people who are experiencing ill mental health in their communities. We also work with our colleagues, and we're working with our colleagues around an enhanced prevention pilot. And there is the Nidderdale Service Navigator project underway in partnership with Nidderdale Plus, who is one of our community anchor organisations. Other opportunities to involve community anchors in enhanced prevention are being explored, and we'll obviously provide further update as that's relevant. The team in communities work around financial inclusion as well, and we continue to lead and coordinate several work areas that are related to financial inclusion. In terms of local food support, following the launch of the findings of the Food Insecurity Insight Study, 4 online community of practice sessions have now taken place with local free and low-cost food providers, and place-based discussions continue with those free and low-cost providers in Scarborough and Harrogate to explore opportunities to create a network and work more collaboratively. This work is continuing throughout 25 and 26. As part of the broader 5th and 6th phase of the Household Support Fund, the Food Support Grant Scheme was administered by the team, and 52 grants to free or low-cost community food providers across the county supported their provision for 24-25. In terms of the cost of living communications, the annual cost of living communications campaign was delivered in the winter of 24 and 25. Work has now begun to start planning for winter 25 and 26. But in the meantime, there is the cost of living webpage, which remains live, which offers sort of that one place for information about the wide range of local schemes and organisations that offer support. We also lead the delivery of the Feast programme, which is North Yorkshire's holiday activities and food programme. It's Feast delivered by a diverse range of over 100 local providers, which includes sports clubs, arts organisations, youth clubs and schools. Since 2021, these providers have delivered nearly 150,000 activities during school holidays. It continues throughout 25 and 26. However, it's likely that this may be the final year of funding from the Department of Environment for this programme. There's work around digital inclusion. The UK Shared Prosperity Fund supported some of this work. Q4 of 24 and 25 saw £600,000 of investment into digital inclusion reach planned completion. The programme continues for a further year across North Yorkshire and York throughout the rest of this year. Reboot North Yorkshire has provided 125 pieces of equipment throughout 24 and 25, and this helps to get people connected, support individuals to improve that social connectedness and to promote access to training or to help continue their education. Around the element of community resilience, the community anchor organisations and development of those organisations continues across the county. The 25 place-based organisations continue to work with us and service teams to progress that anchor model. They've developed action plans and have participated in the UK SPF funded programme for anchors, which was delivered by Community First Yorkshire and Better Connect. There were local assistance centres set up in Knaresborough and Kirby Moorside. So there was a focus on that element of community resilience with the two unexpected flooding events in Knaresborough and Kirby Moorside in May and December 2024 respectively. The communities team took a pivotal role in establishing some of those local assistance centres alongside local partners and supported some of that response and the recovery efforts alongside the local teams and partners. To build on that work and the model further, a range of our local VCSE organisations, local flood groups, community anchors, were invited to planning events earlier in this year, so in March 2025, to look at the roles that they play in responding to emergency events in their area and the resources available for longer term support for communities as they recover. Around capacity building, the team continues to strengthen local community assets and infrastructure. This includes encouraging relationships and collaborations between voluntary organisations, community anchors, as well as stabilising or providing some of that support to help build capacity within them. A competitive grant process for the infrastructure support grant in conjunction with the Humber and North Yorkshire ICB was undertaken in 2024-25, and Community First Yorkshire continue to provide infrastructure support from April 25. We continue to work with other partners such as Two Ridings Community Foundation, the National Lottery and other stakeholders to identify those issues and concerns and develop joint responses appropriately. The localities team have continued to take the lead role in the collection of monitoring and evaluation information from the projects which have been funded through the community strand of the Council's UK Shared Prosperity Programme. Following the success of the Village Hall and Community Building Fund, additional funds were secured through the Mayoral Investment Fund. A pipeline of 20 projects worth £600,000 are now able to go ahead. In terms of community partnerships, the team continues to develop the ambition of supporting local partnerships and multi-agency working through the establishment of those local partnerships. And that started with focusing on the principal towns and the surrounding areas and reflecting those natural communities and where communities identify for themselves. Again, it's a rolled out, phased approach which is being taken with that work. The team's been supporting colleagues from Regeneration on developing the Town Investment Plans programme. These plans will align with the local action plans that are developed through the Community Partnerships programme and could act as catalysts to the formation of partnerships where they don't currently operate. As an update from the parish and local devolutions team, North Yorkshire Council is one of only 6 councils with over 200 parish sector organisations within its boundary, with over 600 of them. The team have worked closely with legal and democratic services, the parish liaison and local devolution teams around the parish sector organisations, offering a range of support, including the development and implementation of the parish charter. The team are also responsible for managing the council's corporate arrangements for the devolution of council assets and services to town and parish councils and community groups, and the council's statutory community rights responsibilities, including assets of community value and community right to challenge. So there was a review of the parish charter in 2024 and 25, and the working group for the parish charter supported the work as it was presented back to them in November 24 and the action plan that was proposed. Further work is to be undertaken in 2025-26 to embed the parish liaison work that has been developed within the charter, and this will confirm and further develop the commitments within the charter throughout North Yorkshire Council, and will help to establish that the baseline of information for performance and service monitoring. The work to develop parish liaison in 2024 and 25 included the establishment of the programme of area-based parish liaison drop-in sessions. They took place across North Yorkshire. There will be a review of the format and content of them, but a regular programme of further meetings will be organised commencing late this summer. A regular update to all parish councils started in August 2024. This is now monthly and brings together all the information relevant to parish councils from across the council. A single parish liaison contact email address was introduced as well in August last year, and that has been really successful, with over 300 email inquiries dealt with by the parish liaison team. The parish consultation panel in 2024-25, a representative group of parish and town and councils and parish meetings was established to provide regular informal dialogue with the parish sector. In December 2024, the parish portal became unsupported and therefore was unavailable to the existing parish councils. The team successfully supported that transition of parish councils to the customer portal for highways reporting, and a dedicated parish council website is being developed that will be available later this year. In 2024 and 25, the work to support and empower town and parish councils and community groups focused on the double devolution pilot proposals. Progress has been dependent on the availability of information due to restructures and the capacity of parish councils to develop and submit full business cases. There is one double devolution proposal due for agreement that will be reported to the Assistant Chief Executive for Local Engagement in June, and it will also include a review of all approved expressions of interest and recommendations for future arrangements. The parish liaison team has been working to develop a new community asset transfer process, and this will be completed later this year. In terms of community rights, the transfer of responsibility from the previous district area based on around the transitional arrangements took place in 2024 and 25. As an update from the migrant programmes team, the team brought together a number of existing refugee and asylum seeker programmes alongside the Home for Ukraine programme to form a single integrated service, and obviously is positioned within the locality service. In partnership with a range of voluntary sector organisations, work has continued around the SWIFT initiative. This is built on a successful programme that operated in Scarborough and the Rydale areas, which aims to welcome and empower migrant communities across North Yorkshire. Lottery funding has now been secured and the scheme launched in April, with place-based partnerships now developing in Scarborough, Selby, Harrogate and Knaresborough to collectively support identified needs in those communities. As of March 2025, 31st of March 2025, North Yorkshire has resettled 484 people under the Afghan resettlement schemes. From that figure, 43 people have moved out of the county. Over half of the households are being accommodated by the Ministry of Defence Service family accommodation on 3-year leases, and North Yorkshire Council will be responsible for rehousing those families should they wish to remain in North Yorkshire. The United Kingdom Resettlement Scheme is a scheme that can be used for for all the UK to respond to refugee crisis wherever in the globe, and has been operationally locally since February 2021. To date, 184 people, which is the equivalent of 46 households, have been resettled in North Yorkshire. The Ministry of Defence Transitional Facility at Knaresborough Garrison, which is to house Afghan families after arrival in the UK, prior to settled accommodation being identified for them, remains in place but will close in May 2025, with all families moved either to settled accommodation elsewhere in the UK or moved to other transitional Ministry of Defence sites outside of North Yorkshire. North Yorkshire Council, in partnership with the Refugee Council, is supporting the families. Around asylum, local authorities have a statutory duty to provide school places for school-aged children and to carry out age-related assessments for those claiming to be below the age of 18. Other support and signposting is provided by Migrant Help, a Home Office contracted prior via a telephone helpline. Under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the number of individual Ukrainians arriving in North Yorkshire on this scheme since March 22 is 1,598. The Ukraine Permission Extension Scheme launched in February 2025, which, if granted, gives a guest a further 18-month visa to stay in the UK. In North Yorkshire, to the end of March 2025, there has been one approved application and a further 19 applied for. Translation interpretation contracts are now managed by the Migrants Programmes team, and this includes British Sign Language. You'll see from within the report that across the council, the use of those contracts has increased. To improve some of the internal processes, the team has created a training package to ensure all council staff know how and when to access translation interpretation services. And there is work alongside the transformation team around an artificial intelligence translations tool that has been piloted, ready for launch in the next financial year. Although this tool won't support all translations, it is anticipated that it will provide an overall saving against that element of the service. So just to highlight some of those local Harrogate and Knaresborough areas from the community's perspective. Around the community anchor organisations, I outlined in the report that the Community Anchor Collective model has been formed for Harrogate. The model essentially establishes a coordinating organisation on behalf of the collective of local organisations and neighbourhood anchors which anticipate and respond to the needs of the communities. There are two place-based organisations that have been identified locally, and that is Harrogate and District Community Action and Harrogate Neighbours Community Hub. These organisations are working to develop those action plans around the range of characteristics and services that other anchors have previously done, and that will enable to work with the council as a system partner. The work continues with the two community anchor organisations in Knaresborough and Boroughbridge, and the anchor organisations in these areas, as has previously been referenced, remain the same, and that is Chain Lane Community Hub and Boroughbridge Community Charity. For community partnerships, the first stages of discussions are underway in relation to establishing community partnerships in Knaresborough and Boroughbridge. And around the Starbeck Community Fund, it's just to highlight that in 2024, over £9,000 was distributed directly to the community of Starbeck via the Starbeck Community Fund, and work is underway locally again around that fund. Working with health partners, I continue to support the local care partnership, the transformation of community health services and the development of community beacons alongside the West Yorkshire Cancer Alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. Are there questions, observations? Yes, Councillor Aldred.
Thanks, Susie. That was very comprehensive. Have I got this right? Probably. Count. Yeah, Paul's just answered the question. There is only one double devolution scheme going forward to the executive at the moment, after two whole years of the existence of North Yorkshire Council. That's right.
That's what's outlined in the report, Councillor, but I can take that away and seek further clarification from the team for you. If there's anything else coming forward, we can answer that more widely.
I just think that's appalling. Sorry, you know, part of the selling of this wonderful new super council, as was referred to this morning, was it was going to be the most local of local councils. And if we can just have evidence of one issue where something is being passed, and I think it's Knaresborough Market from mutterings to my left here, which should have been done before now, as was alluded to earlier as well. One single project in 2 years, and we claim to be the most local of local councils. Not surprising, actually, because I have an email from a member of the executive who is not actually in this room and hasn't just gone out, but it's another one who claims that he was never in favour of it and he didn't think it was going to happen. So if the executive members don't believe in localism, who actually does? I think we've been sold a con here, and I think we should get in touch with trading standards and say it's not working.
You've made your point well made, Councillor Aldred. You have a right of reply, Susie, but if it's a statement of fact in terms of, and if you can clarify if there is a pipeline, then that might satisfy Councillor Aldred and others. But I think point is well made, and I won't embarrass you necessarily to respond. Councillor Harrison.
I just wanted to actually come back on Chris, because I think the key thing is not that I don't agree that we've been sold a con, but what I would say is organisations that want to take services on should, you know, they should be encouraged to have those conversations. I mean, the report actually does say that this one is coming forward in June. I'm not saying there's a pipeline that's gone before or there's a huge pipeline to come. I don't know. But I think members that have involved in the Knaresborough one will understand the complexity of any of these transfers. So I don't think we've been sold a con. I think the key thing is, and particularly now that Harrogate Town Council is established, if there are assets and services that local organisations want to enter into a discussion about taking on, then they should. And don't be put off by the fact that as a new council, it might have taken a while for the pipeline to start coming through. Please don't let that put you off. You should approach the council, and if it's in this area, I'm sure Susie will work with you to progress those.
Thank you very much.
Just very quickly coming back, the fact is
we have the fact on record.
Yeah, we can count,
2
Chris.
years.
That's fine.
But don't describe it as a con, though, because that's disrespectful to the officers of the council as well as the groups that may or may not want to take things on.
I'm not blaming the officers at all. It's political.
I think you are being entirely political.
I have that email from a member of the executive, which I can share with you.
Yeah.
I'm not interested, thanks.
No. Let's move on. We have the fact recorded, and we have the willingness from Susie to work with and perhaps identify any pipeline. Councillor Haslam.
Yeah, so apologies, Chris. Apparently you had the question right. So thank you. So anyway, Susie, you cover a multitude of sins in this department. Some of the things are what I would call maybe redemption, helping people out, maybe it's mental health, etc., helping people that don't have a lot of money. And on the other hand, you've got things where you're responding to asylum seekers, etc. And this is your department, not you personally. What I'd be interested in is on those things that are what I would class as an intervention, how do we make sure that the intervention is a permanent, long-lasting solution? And second off, where we are treating symptoms as opposed, so some of the examples I've given, say, for example, mental health or insufficient funds, are we actually feeding back what the cause is so that that cause can then go back through a different, it's not your responsibility to sort the cause out necessarily, but so that people are aware of what's causing your need to provide these services. I just think it's important we have a total loop because, in my opinion, you have to sort the cause. You know, it's great to keep taking headache tablets, but eventually you have to sort out why you keep getting headaches. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor. In terms of the feeding back, the work that we do within communities is measured. We do ask for feedback in terms of the Inspire Fund. We do ask for feedback in terms of the activities that has supported, what impact that has had within the community, and what difference has been felt. We do work with those partners as well to identify what else is potentially being found as that work is being delivered in community, to then look at what else needs to be established there to address some of those root causes. A lot of the work around the prevention agenda is exactly that, is trying to get in earlier. Now, some of it is further upstream and some of it's needing to get further downstream, but it's absolutely around how do we establish longer term sustainable solutions within the community. And some of that is where that community resilience aspect is really important, about how communities understand how they can come together, how they work with us and alongside us. So it's very much part of that wider conversation as well.
Thank you, Susie. Are there other questions? Councillor Walker and then Councillor Broadbank.
So it's just in terms of the translation and interpretation services that you've talked about in 5.6. Those services are really important so that residents can get the right things that they need. I'm just wondering whether you've explored kind of, you know, we all have software on our phone where you can quite easily translate things. You can have meetings where you, on Teams, you click a button and you can listen when you can see the subtitles in a different language and things like that. I'm just wondering what free options the council has looked at. It just seems an awful lot of money, and I just think perhaps if we can be more cost effective and looking at some of the free and, you know, readily available off the shelf solutions, that might be something. And I just wondered if you could let me know if that's happened.
Yeah, I can't answer that at the moment, Councillor, because that is from another part of the team. But I will take that question back and I'll get an answer for you. That's not a problem.
Thank you, Susie. Councillor Broadbank.
Yeah, just thank you for the report. I've been used to reading reports for a while. I did struggle to try and get to grips with initially what this was about, and the phraseology used and terminology used and various things like that wasn't in the easiest, written in the easiest or put down in the easiest format. And I would appeal to people writing reports, if they could make it something simpler, easier for people to understand, because some of the technology, I had to read it several times before I started to get the grasp of what you were trying to do. Some of the phrases, and I mean, you see them in a lot of, unfortunately, you do see them in a lot of local government reports, and it's something, if you're going to get something across to people, it has to be done in a way that not just councillors, but other people reading it could understand it easily and see what it's about. So I'm not having a go at you. I just think that the way reports are put together, it's important, and I think the phraseology and terminology used, the way it's done, is important for people to basically get to grips with what you're trying to tell us.
That's absolutely fine, Councillor. I'll feed that back to the wider service as well. But if there's anything in particular that we need to focus on within that, more than happy to have that conversation with you outside of the room, and then we can obviously review that as a service.
Thank you very much. There's one more question. Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Just a really quick one, just on the translation service as well, which I know is not perhaps your direct responsibility, but I was just a bit concerned to see that British Sign Language has now become part of the same team dealing with foreign languages. And under the migrant programme scheme. I'm very conscious that, when administrations change, there's a danger that sometimes migrant programme schemes are not seen as worthy of as much investment as they might be getting today. And I would hate for British Sign Language translation to be affected. So that doesn't feel, I understand it from the point of view of it's a different language, that's why it's been put together, but that just raises a bit of an alarm for me.
I'll feed that back, Councillor, and see what the response is for you. That's not a problem.
So, thank you very much. That's great. And thanks for all the work that you do coordinating. I know for the last 2 years we've taken a particular interest in the VCSE area in Harrogate. It's nice to see things moving on in the local area. So we look forward to more reports and more progress. We now come to our bonus item. Simon wished to come and give a verbal report. I believe he has some slides, which he's not so nimble as able to present, but they will be presented for him. And just in terms of time, and we do now have a working group to address these issues. It might therefore be that this is a verbal update for information as it came to us late. We squeezed into the agenda. If we can have brief questions for clarification, if you like, rather than a debate and a discussion, because we can take that either into the working group or into a different section. But if Simon can give his update, and we'll just have brief questions for clarification after it.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Really the reason I wanted to come to talk to you today is that a decision has reached me about 5 council-owned small development sites in Harrogate that are a legacy from Harrogate Borough Council. And I thought I'd do you the courtesy of raising it with you before I took a decision, just see whether you agree with the way that I'm thinking or not. But just, I know I mustn't start droning on. I just want to read you something apropos of the question that Paul asked about, kind of what we're doing to prevent the painkillers. It just struck me. I had a very nice letter last week about some of the classes that are run at Selby Leisure Centre, which are really replicating what's done in Harrogate. So I'll read it briefly. Thank you so much for meeting me last week at Selby Leisure Centre. Introduced me to Brian, his falls prevention class. It was a great opportunity to meet some of the group and hear from them. They were keen to give me feedback, and all was very positive. They are very popular classes. Probably the best quote was from a lady with a walker who freely volunteered with pride in front of Brian that she can now put her knickers on independently. It was obviously something that was really important to her and was having a big impact on daily life. And, I know in a way it's quite a sort of humorous thing, but actually that is transformation of somebody's life. And the more of that we can do, the better for the lady concerned, for her need for other external help. So I just thought I'd share that because it seemed pertinent to what Paul had said. Onto these sites. Some of you may well remember decisions being taken about these sites, but they're the sort of infill sites that Harrogate was quite good at doing. And these are 5 small sites that have come to my attention because they don't stack up in terms of economic viability. So originally the proposal was for 7 units overall. There is some external funding that was obtained by Harrogate Borough Council. But the real question is this the best way to spend money from the housing revenue account? And you'll see why I raise that in a moment. So next slide, please, Edward. Thank you. You do it very well. It's skill from Craven, you see, that's the thing. Woodfield Close, former garage site, 2 one-bedroom houses, homes for rough sleeping, accommodation, and you'll see there was some funding. The original budgeted cost was £375,000, which would be justifiable in HRA terms. But the tender cost now, and we've had our own team look at whether they could beat that, is £621,000. And basically under our 40-year rule, that doesn't stack up. Yeah. So that presents us with something of a dilemma because, of course, fees have already been spent. There's funding from the Brownfield Land Fund and from Homes England that has been obtained by Harrogate Borough Council. And, you know, we're in a position where the site is only worth 40 grand if we sell it. So that's the first one. David, next slide, please. Church Close in Sharrow, 2 two-bedroom flats, Homes England funding, Brownfield funding. The requirement is that they would be social rents, so not affordable rents, social rents. The original budgeted cost, 187k per unit. The tender price now, £296,000 a unit, which would again not fit our metrics for sustainable purchases or developments for the housing revenue account. Losses, you know, on funding received and so on. I suppose really it's the fees that are the loss, because the 90k funding returned and the 30k funding returned are not monies that have been spent. They'd just be returning monies. That site has value, as you might imagine, in Sharrow. But for us, it doesn't make sense. You know, we can buy 2 3-bedroom houses off the peg for that money. So possibly even more, you know, under 106 agreements. So again, it doesn't make sense to me. Next one, please, David. Poplar Grove in Harrogate. You'll see again that the difference between the budgeted costs and the tender costs, and then the position that we would be in at year 40, which is the benchmark for us. It's, things basically have to pay for themselves in 40 years. That doesn't meet the criteria. There's value to the site, and there is obviously a loss in fees to date. Gascoigne Crescent. So these next two are little bits of gardens attached to existing council homes. Again, you'll see the difference between the budgeted costs, which would have made sense under the HRA, and the tender costs now. Again, a loss at year 40. And again, fees that we will lose in the event that we don't develop it. It may have some value, the site, and the same goes for this site in Borough Bridge. Again, projecting a loss after 40 years. Possibly some residual value, but they're not really suitable sites for development. Now, I think if you just go on to the next slide, that's basically showing the cost implications of developing them. Which is pretty stark, really. And then the recommendations are on, the cost implications of not doing this are there. And then the recommendations, I think, are on yeah, the capital receipts, and yeah, which we've already gone through. So those are the overall financial implications. I think the important thing, so this isn't to criticise the predecessor council, because Harrogate Borough Council had limited land and limited opportunities to develop social housing. And so it may well be, even with the inflation in costs, that Harrogate Borough Council might have thought some of these were worth doing, even though they didn't make sense, because they didn't have the scope that we now have as one big council with 8,500 council homes. So, you know, we can put money back into the housing revenue account, and we can buy off the peg houses in the Harrogate district for less money. And to me, it's about delivering housing rather than being precious about some site that we own. So those are the options, and the next slide shows kind of where our thinking is on the specific sites. The Woodfield Close one, to hang on to it and see if we can come up with a better workable scheme ourselves. To dispose of the Church Close and Poplar Grove sites, and then to possibly return the Gascoigne, Crescent, Springfield Drive sites to being gardens, which they were. So that's it really, as far as that's concerned. And I'd welcome any views on it. Yeah.
Right, Councillor Walker.
So I wasn't a member of Harrogate Borough, so some of this is quite new to me. I suppose I need to try and understand, have they already got planning permission? I think they probably have. And I suppose I'm no expert, but looking at some of those build costs, they seem really quite significant, and the land is already owned by the council. So for me, they just seemed quite expensive bills. As I say, I'm no expert. But what I would hate to see is that they get sold to a private developer, and the private developer makes an absolute killing, and the council loses out on that money that could have been reinvested in something else. I suppose that's all I would say. As I say, I'm no expert, but that's my observation just looking at those numbers.
So we have had that checked by our, you know, that Harrogate did its own schemes. They had their own team to build some of the sort of infill social housing that they did. So our question is, can this be done ourselves for less? And we think maybe the Woodfield Close one, with there's some potential there to do that cheaper ourselves. So that's why we said put a lag on it. But the others come out very much the same as the tender costs. But I absolutely get your point, Matt, because it's what happens to local authorities, isn't it? You get rid of a nuisance and somebody makes a fortune out of it, and we all have egg on our faces. So I will try and make sure that doesn't happen. But you can see that they don't stack up, you know. I mean, I'm all for, I want there to be new social housing in Harrogate and everywhere in North Yorkshire. But what I don't want to do is have less expensive that doesn't make sense, you know. So, as I say, I get why Harrogate wanted to do it. But
yep. Okay. Councillor Slater.
Thank you. Yeah, just on the similar vein, really, like looking at that Poplar Grove one, for example, I think on your slide it actually said that if we sold it, it might be, you know, a developer might well wish to develop on it. But, you know, if I look at the value of houses in that area, if the build cost that you've been given is correct, then no developer would be making any money on it, because that is, you will not recover that. That does not reflect the sale prices of properties in that area. And yet we see some brand new developments like in Knaresborough, and you've got, like, you know, 3 or 4 bedroomed houses coming in around £300,000. So yeah, the build costs just seem staggering.
as I say, I know we've looked at them independent of the tenders, but I will push back on that. So local knowledge is a very good thing.
Was there a question from Councillor Gibbs? Sorry.
Well, Monica and Matt between them have kind of covered it. It was, you know, based on what's in front of us, I would support the recommendations that you proposed. But I guess one question I was going to have is if we decide to dispose of the ones that we choose to dispose of, are we firstly confident that we will get the values we think we will for them, i.e. will somebody want them? And secondly, you know, are we going to be left in the potentially awkward situation where somebody else makes a lot more money? I do accept that building one house is per unit more expensive than building a whole estate because of, you know, obviously associated costs and stuff. But broadly, I'm happy. And just one point for clarity, if you're going around the houses with this, I suppose the sharer one, which the sharer one isn't in this patch. You might want to take to your own Skipton and Hepburn one. I know it's Harrogate Borough, but it's not in this area committee. Yeah. But I support the proposal for it, but it probably isn't our place to say.
I'll take the points on board, and I'll you know,
Councillor
that's why I
Harrison,
wanted to come.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Harrison, Councillor Aldred.
I just, first of all, thank you for the courtesy of coming. It's useful information, and it also, I think, it helps for the committee to see the detail of bringing forward these schemes, how tricky they are, and, you know, on the face of it, it would seem simple, but it never is. But I just wanted, for the benefit of those that don't have a history back with Harrogate Borough Council, just to reassure, and Philip, you'll be aware of this, that there were a number of schemes that were delivered. So these are the ones that weren't delivered. I know I've got ones in Killingall and Hamswaite, you know, that were and are really successful. So we mustn't be too hard on ourselves for the ones that we don't manage to bring forward.
No, there were some hugely successful schemes and carbon neutral schemes. So, yeah, I'm certainly not. I think Harrogate did very well with very limited landholding.
Yes. Sorry, who was the other? Councillor Aldred.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Michael, for that, because very, very relevant points. And it goes back to what the question to Susie, really. Once you were out of the room, Simon. 2 years ago, we could have done this, couldn't we? Because the figures probably added up. Harrogate HBC did have a record of developing garage sites. There's a few in my Fairfax ward, as was my new ward, High Harrogate, Kingsley, now developed very successfully using in-house expertise. And that's what Harrogate had. But suddenly we get this new super council, we get LGR thrust upon us, and there's been 2 years. So the question is, Sam, why didn't we kind of get on with this straight away 2 years ago? And those figures would have been a bit different, would they not?
Because that's about capacity. Harrogate Borough Council would have had no more capacity to develop these itself. But, you know, the Harrogate team have been developing other sites.
But so, it did, because it had the planning permission.
What's happened in the last 2 years is 28% inflation in build costs. That's what's
But my point is, if we hadn't had LGR, it would have gone ahead, and maybe not all of them would have worked, but some of them would be developed now, and people would be living in them.
Not unless you had expanded your workforce, managed to recruit people to do it, and have the additional costs of that. No.
Yeah, the figures would have been different. I think you could have done that.
I think the point is made, and we're sort of we're dealing with history, and point well made and recorded and valid. Final point.
Localist of local councils.
I've got a quick question, but Councillor Slater first.
Yeah, just a really quick one. I know that we should be sort of also providing a certain amount of self-build sites. So I just wondered whether that had been considered as well, whether any of those would be appropriate for that.
I think probably they're probably not seen to be viable for that, but I'll check where we are with that.
And my question, with a declared community land trust hat on, not non-pecuniary, but also in the context that there has now been an initial informal liaison conversation outside of this process between Harrogate and Knaresborough Community Land Trusts, with an interest to just sort of get together and understand what opportunities. So the simple question is, are you aware as to whether any of these schemes could be progressed, potentially with other grants that a community land trust or similar community-led housing could access that might make them viable? Because clearly no community land trust wants to take them on if they're not viable, but there may be other routes.
So if it was legal for us to do so, with the policy that we have and the strategy for the second homes council tax premium, we could put money in to make them viable. But we're not putting that money into ourselves. So is there a possibility that they could be made viable for a community led housing scheme? Yes, it would be worth talking to us. Sorry, it's possible. I'm not saying
no.
Absolutely,
I'm not asking you to say yes, but
if it would stack
it
up.
is worth having that conversation.
But part of those pots of funding are about making things viable that would fall short. That's about seeing sites that otherwise have stagnated actually bring forward housing. So it's worth having a conversation.
Well,
definitely.
In the spirit of other comments as well, very grateful that you brought them along. We've had a conversation and a few points to carry back. I don't think anybody is averse to, even though this isn't the decision-making body, we're not saying, oh, this is terrible, although we're expressing some regret and some concern and some possible other avenues.
Some useful comments, Chairman, actually. Thank you.
Good. I'm assuming, Edward, that you'll circulate those slides because they weren't made available beforehand, and that might stimulate further conversations, and I'll personally take that up myself with my other hat on.
Can I read you something else, Chairman? Because I know you like to hear good news, and there is some good news. And I'll just read you this, and forgive me for doing it, but I was so pleased to see this. This is from a lady called Catherine Hatton, who's a homeless advisor to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. It's addressed to our homeless team. Thanks again for inviting me along to your partnership meeting. It was good to hear from and meet providers working across North Yorkshire. I wanted to follow up on some of the comments that I made in the meeting in relation to your local government reorganisation journey. Going through LGR is a painful and difficult process, but as I said at the meeting, I'm impressed with the amazing progress that you have made as a new unitary. From my experience in other parts of the country, other areas have not made the same level of progress in the same period as you, and are effectively still operating as separate districts. You've managed to bring together 7 operating systems into one, at the same time as creating new units of temporary accommodation across the county, reviewing your young person's pathway, reviewing your homeless and rough sleepers strategy, engaging and creating new successful partnerships with providers across North Yorkshire, and that's to name just a few of your accomplishments. The amount of work and dedication this has taken should not be underestimated and should be celebrated. Well done to all the team, and I absolutely endorse well done to all our officers who work in the difficult world of homelessness and rough sleeping. Hats off to them.
Thank you,
That's
Simon.
a good note to finish
Duly
on,
noted. Duly noted. And yes, praise always accepted where due. Thank you very much. Right, we are still progressing through our agenda. The agenda item 11, committee work programme. That again has been circulated. Edward, do you want to just run us through that rather than listen to me?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I won't go through the whole work programme, but just briefly for the benefit of members of the public. So this is the work programme that sets out all of the planned activity that the committee intends to undertake, and it also highlights some of the informal meetings that take place in between the working group, between the committee meetings as well. The only 2 points to add to the report which have come in since publication is I will be arranging a member briefing on the new hub page. So this is a councillor page that's being set up with information like contact details, handy links and things like that. So there will be a session with the officer who's developing it for you to give feedback and highlight anything you'd like to see included on it. So I'll send out details for that shortly. It will probably be a daytime session, but I will make sure that we arrange a follow-up if there's anyone who can't make the date and still would like to give feedback. And just to remind people as well, obviously the next meeting, the first item on the agenda will be the attendance of the Mayor and the Chief Exec of the York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. So just a reminder that if anyone has any questions they would like to submit in advance, to send those through to me by mid-August, and I'll pass them through. It doesn't preclude questions and discussion points being raised on the day, but if there are specific answers that you want or officers that you'd like them to bring with them, send those details through to me and I'll make sure that happens. But apart from that, if there are any points that the chairs of the working groups would like to raise or additional items you'd like added to the work programme, please let me know.
Thank you. Are there any additions or comments in terms of the work programme? It's running along pretty. Councillor Aldred?
You might not be able to answer this, Edward, but as chair of the Gateway Working Group, do you know anything about the judicial review, the hearing? I know it was a month or so ago now.
I don't, but I will find out. I'll speak to the officers involved and get you an update. I've not heard anything from them directly because I know that was where we left it. We would arrange another update when there was information, which I've not had sent through, but I will follow up and let you know, and the other members of the working group as well.
Councillor Walker.
So I might have remembered incorrectly, but I thought I was on the Housing Liaison Working Group, which is on page 48. So if that could be updated.
Thank you, I will. I think I'd not heard it officially, so now that you've mentioned it, I will put you on the list. But yes, thank you. There is another meeting I think we're going to look to set up in August, I believe it was. So yeah, I'll make sure you're included on that.
Yes, that working group hasn't formally been constituted in that whilst the material shared by the officer was circulated, there were only, I think, me and Sam who enjoyed that briefing. So at the next meeting, we will formally establish it and elect a chair and progress the Housing Liaison Working Group. So, from small beginnings. So that is item 11. Item 12, Area Committee Annual Report. This is a report that Edward has compiled on the basis of the work programme and activities. There's opportunity to comment, but as Monica was chair during the year, I sort of leave her, if she wishes to, make any comment on the report.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Edward, for compiling it. I think it's a really good summarisation of what we managed to achieve last year. And I think, you know, it's good to reflect and see what we've brought to the discussions. I think we should be really proud of what we've done, particularly the 20 miles per hour zone implementation, which has been a bit of a labour of love, I think, over the past 2 years, really, but is finally coming to fruition, which is great to see. I think we worked really, really well as well with our seed funding that we had. I thought those discussions were really good, really comprehensive. I think we worked well together to come to some good solutions. It's a shame, obviously, that the council doesn't have the funds to do that again at this time, but I think that was really, really worthwhile. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody for all of their input last year, for bringing things onto the work programme, for all the officers that attended and gave us reports, and for the exec for sometimes listening.
Thank you. I'll assume no other comments, but thank you again. That will go on record. And the final item, date of next meeting, 25th of September, 10 o'clock here. Councillor Aldred?
All I was going to say was we should really thank Monica for chairing the last 2 years, because it is I've been sat in that chair on a few occasions. It is a difficult job, and you've done it really, really well. And I think a lot of the work that has been done is because of you. So, and I'm not just saying that because she's sitting next to me today. Thank you very, very much. And I think we should give her a round of applause, don't you, for the last 2 years, Jo? Because we're not going to buy her any flowers or anything. No, or chocolates.
Thank you very much. Formally noted. So the date of the next meeting, 25th of September. Obviously, if you feel that there is business that can be attended to, we will have a mid-cycle briefing, and Edward is available to take those thoughts and views. Otherwise, I will formally close the meeting. Thank you.